The views and opinions expressed by tonight's guest and topic of discussion do not necessarily represent the official policy or position of Spaced Out Radio, Spaced Out Weekend, Spaced Out Radio Limited, its hosts, syndicated carriers, or anyone associated with this broadcast. Any rebroadcast, reproduction, or other use of this broadcast or podcast without the express written consent of Spaced Out Radio or Spaced Out Radio Limited is strictly prohibited. Listener discretion is advised. Are you experienced?
Stop right there!
From high atop the mountains of British Columbia to you listening around the world, this is Spaced Out Radio with host Dave Scott.
They let us play with all our toys, they let us think that we're big boys, they let us make a lot of noise, but we ain't rule the world. They let us think we're Superman.
You can follow us on our website, spacedoutradio.com, on iTunes and TuneIn. Follow Dave on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio, on Facebook at Spaced Out Radio Show, or on our YouTube channel, Spaced Out Radio Show.
I try to act so cool, but you know I'm just a fool for you. I will stop till I reach the top just to be there with you.
Dave, oh Dave, are you playing with Bigfoot and aliens again?
Dad, you gotta stop haunting the ghost. You're scaring them.
All right, seriously, put down the pointy sticks.
Oh, the deeper I fall.
Okay! Game on! Game on!
The password is...
All right.
Buckle up, space travelers. It's time to go for a ride on Spaced Out Radio. Mr. Bumblefoot, Dave is ready for liftoff.
I try to act so cool, but you know I'm just a fool for you.
Seriously, Dave? Really? Aren't you a little old for a tinfoil hat?
Hello. Toby. Bye-bye. Love you. Bye-bye.
Judges, please take your seat about row. There will be entrance. Prepare for takeoff. Start. 2, 1. Boost ignition and lift off.
I'm such a lucky guy, 'cause after all this time, it's like the deeper I go, the deeper I fall. The deeper I go, the deeper I fall.
Good evening and welcome to Spaced Out Radio tonight. I am your host, Dave Scott, and it's great to have you along for the ride on this Tuesday, May 30th, Wednesday, May 31st. If you're on the East Coast or across the pond, hope you had a great day and night. We are live right here in the Great White North in the heart of central British Columbia as we are here 7 days a week. We welcome everyone listening in on WQEE 99 Rock the Key down in Noonan, Georgia, home of The Walking Dead. We are also live as well on the United Public Radio Network on 107.7 FM in New Orleans and over 160 countries around the world. We are also live at spacedoutradio.com, Spreaker, KTLK, The Fringe FM, Renegade Talk Radio in Las Vegas, the High Plains Talk Radio Network, and on Revolution Radio, where, remember, the Double R Machine is a donation station financed by you, the valued listener. Head on over to freedomslips.com and donate today. Get your horns up if you loved our intro music by the guitar god himself, Mr. Ron Bumblefoot THAL, formerly of Guns N' Roses, currently of Art of Anarchy. Bumblefoot is the official sound of SOR. You can also follow us all over social media on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio. You can give our Facebook page a like, Spaced Out Radio Show. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, Spaced Out Radio Show. Follow me on Instagram, Dave Scott SOR. Tune us in on TuneIn. Download our shows on iTunes. We're also on RadioGuide.fm, TalkStream Live, Player.fm, and Stitcher. And our website is SpacedOutRadio.com. And if you head over to Patreon.com for as low as $1 a month, you could become a patron of SOR as well. Now, if you want to take part in this show, I need you to do me a favor. I need you to sign into one of the chat rooms. Either going to our website, clicking Listen Live, it's all free. You could go on Revolution Radio, on Spreaker, on the UPRN chat room, or on Facebook if you're one of the lucky and valued members of the SOR Space Travelers Club. Or if you're on Twitter, head to the hashtag Spaced Out Radio. I'll get to your comments and questions in there as well. Now, if you head to our website for $5 a month, you can become an SOR Space Traveler. And as of right now, you can open up and go to our Spaced Out Radio store, pick up a t-shirt, poster, a sticker, and soon, Carl the Alien calendars. Not calendars, candles. Candles! We also have a new section called The Encounter Online. That's from our editors, Eric Markham and Everett Thiemer. You can check out my latest blog there as well. And if you've had an experience you can't explain, fill out an SOR Sightlines report. Tonight, we look into the skies of Canada, and no, we're not looking for the beautiful Aurora Borealis. Although it's not quite the hot-button topic as it is south of the border, the field of ufology is kind of a hidden subject around these parts. It's not that people don't believe, it's just that they're just not as passionate and open about spaceships and aliens as our American brethren are. Which is weird because we have some of the best researchers on the planet when it comes to this phenomena. I think of people like Chris Rutkowski, Grant Cameron, Victor Vigiani, Stanton Friedman. Tonight, one of those budding ufologists is MJ Banias. MJ is out of Winnipeg, Manitoba, and he's a full-time educator with a background in history and cultural studies, a lover of science fiction, geek culture, and all things weird. He enjoys studying the stranger aspects of modern pop culture. He's a former field investigator with MUFON and contributes to Mysterious Universe and Rogue Planet. His work is also featured in a new book entitled UFOs, Reframing the Debate. MJ, welcome to Spaced Out Radio. How you doing, my friend?
I'm terrific. Thank you for having me. It's a real honor.
You know what? We don't get a lot of Canadian ufologists on this show. And maybe it's just because, the popularity in the U.S., but I love talking about the field of research here in Canada because the stories are there. We just haven't really popularized them, and we're going to get into that a lot tonight. But first, before we get into that, how did you get into this field? What attracted you to it?
Like most people, I think, who sort of are into UFOs and all weird things in general, I think you have a strange upbringing where your parents, for some reason, let you watch, television shows when you're young that they really shouldn't be, and all of a sudden you're addicted. For me, it was just growing up amongst, weird people and definitely sort of TV that influenced my young impressionable brain. I used to watch a television show called The Outer Limits, not the original Outer Limits from like the 1960s, like the 90s reboot, and watching the aliens and all the odd shenanigans that occurs with all the plot twists at the end really kind of sparked my interest in the whole subject. And just from being a little kid onwards, I have always kind of been fascinated with the strange and the obscure, and UFOs were just part of that. Yeah.
Did you ever have any sightings as a kid that kind of made you think that there might be something to this?
You know, I'm one of those weird UFO people who I've never had a paranormal sighting or a UFO sighting. I've never had a strange experience, or at least I've never had a strange experience that I can't sort of attribute to something rational or normal. You know, maybe I've seen a strange light in the sky, but you know, it wasn't sort of so anomalous that it blew my mind. I'm one of those non-experiencer UFO people.
Does that get you in trouble with a lot of people when you talk about them and you're like, no, I've never had an experience? Because you're not the only one. Stanton Friedman says he's never had an experience. Richard Dolan has said he's never had an experience. Yet these are big names in the field of ufology.
Yeah, you know, I think it really depends on how you look at it. I think having the experience opens you up to certain sides of the debate, or certain sides of sort of the UFO discourse, but then not having the experience keeps you sort of open to possibilities that, you know, maybe you're a little more neutral about certain things, or you maybe are a little more skeptical about certain things. Not skeptical in sort of the negative bad sense, but just sort of skeptical about you know, the overall narrative that is UFO culture. So I think there's kind of it's a back and forth, right? I think there's perks to potentially being involved in UFOs and having an experience, and I think there's perks to being involved in UFOs and not having an experience. So have I gotten in trouble? No, though I have, you know, been occasionally in the arguments online where people say, well, you don't know because you've never seen one, or you've never, you know, had an alien experience or whatever, and suddenly like I'm like not one of the chosen few who have. So, you know, once in a while I get yelled at once in a while, but ultimately it's not too bad.
And you're a family man. You have a beautiful wife and kids.
Yeah.
I'm wondering, when you told her about this fascination with UFOs, how did that go over?
You know, I have to be honest, I married her first, and then I springed on her after. So it was
smart thinking.
Yeah, you know, like sorry, honey, it's too late now. No, I think she's always kind of known that there's something strange about her husband. And you know, we've talked about it and stuff, but I have to be honest, it was only recently, I think within the last 2 years or so, that I've really become much more involved in the study of it, in the research, in the writing, really started to get out there sort of publicly a little more. And I was really just pushed by Chris Rutkowski, actually, who's a friend of mine, who you mentioned in the intro. But he was kind of, you know, the guy who kind of said, you know, you have a good head on your shoulders, you know, you can write half decently, so you should start. And it sort of went from there.
The reason why I ask that is when we come out in public, okay, like I have had a very tough time coming out in public. I rarely discuss my children, even though they are experiencers as well. I don't discuss my daytime career that pays my bills. You know, up until recently, because we're holding the first annual Spaced Out Radio Paracon this fall, I never even discussed where I lived. Like, it's not that I was embarrassed. I mean, I don't even use my real name. I use my first name, my real name, first name is Dave, but I use my middle name as my last name. And, you know, I've had a very tough time, you know, sharing and showing that true identity. So for you to come out, did you struggle with that at all in coming out when you decided that I'm going to become public and write about this?
Yeah, and it's been a slow process for sure. It wasn't just sort of an all of a sudden, you know, here I am and I'm going to start. Like, I didn't just kind of like a massive dump of information and be like, hey, this is me. It's definitely been a slow sort of release, a slow burn. Only because, you know, you want kind of people to acclimatize maybe to the fact that you have some weird interests. However, you know, I'm not strictly sort of like, I would never really call myself a ufologist. I don't really like the term necessarily, because I dabble in other sort of weird things. So really my writing, while I do write a significant amount about UFOs, I write a lot about sort of futurism, and I write a lot about sort of weird science and weird news, and that's a lot of my Mysterious Universe writing careers is based on a lot more about on that sort of odd scientific discoveries that we're making sort of in physics or whatever. So I don't really consider myself specifically a UFO sort of a ufologist, I guess, but it's definitely a huge aspect of it. So I sort of have that luxury a little bit in that I can say, well, I'm a writer or a blogger who talks about the strange and the anomalous and the weird, and it's helped a little bit in people being like, oh yeah, that's cool, no problem, they say. Yeah, but everyone's been really accepting so far, and everyone's just like, it's MJ, it's the way he is.
And it's good to have that social acceptance, but I can tell you that I had some friends, very close friends, over the last couple of years as I have opened up and delved more into this, that have actually pulled away from me. Have you experienced that as well?
No, and I have to be honest, like I said, my family's been super supportive. Friends generally have been supportive as well. I've never really had anyone who's sort of said... Or has even I've never had the feeling that someone's been like, oh, he's into this, and then suddenly, like you say, sort of becoming distant or pulling away. I haven't had that. I can't really say that I have. Everyone's pretty chill, so it's a good feeling. But again, I consider sort of my work within the field not really directly involving sort of the direct study of UFOs, for example, but I sort of study the culture that exists around UFOs, the subculture, and sort of the philosophy of UFOs. And that's really where my heart and soul is. My background in my academic career is sort of culture studies and critical theory. So there's a lot of philosophy that's sort of done. And I think the UFO culture and the world of UFOs is sort of beautiful philosophy that's just ripe for the picking, and no one else in the UFO world is really doing it. It's me and a couple other people, and that's really it. So there's sort of this wealth of information out there that no one's looking at in regards to, I guess, the philosophy around the UFO question. So I can also just sort of say to people, when they ask me about UFOs, be like, I'm more of a philosopher of them, not really, a researcher of all things UFO, if that makes sense.
No, because it is a wide field. There's a vast array of different topics. Are you like me then, MJ, where you open that first door and you walk in because you think the answers are behind that door, only to find 10 more doors, and then behind each of those doors there's another 10 doors each? Have you found that in this field, that as soon as you think you're getting close to some sort of information, whether it's on the theory of everything, whether it's on the sci-fi vision of everything, that you're no closer to an answer than what you thought you were?
Yeah, I think if we sort of look at UFOs from a bird's eye view, right? If we sort of zoom out on the entire UFO narrative, right? If we looked at a plot line of a story, with every sort of event that occurs, with every sort of UFO incident or UFO sighting or researcher who comes out and has sort of theories or claims, or people who come out and speculate about the various origins of UFOs or whatever, right? You take the entire package. You start to very quickly realize that really every time anyone says anything about the UFO in any sort of way, they're just really creating more questions, and it's just it's exponential. So I think, when you say, you sort of open the door and there's 10 more doors behind it, I think we're well past the 10 more doors. I think right now, every time you open a door, you're dealing with sort of this infinite amount of them that just keep going outwards and outwards. Because ultimately, and I've said this in my blog before, that, anyone who says they know what's going on is either delusional or they're trying to sell you something. And I think that this is sort of the beauty of the UFO discourse as a whole, is no one has an answer, and no one is close to having an answer, at least not one that they can sort of back up with any sort of rational claim or something that the rest of us can sort of believe in beyond just their personal opinion. So this is why UFOs are great, right? Like I said, they're sort of philosophical, like low-hanging fruit that are just like no one seems to be picking. But for people like me who are really interested in philosophy and really interested in the weird and the paranormal and the strange, I'm just running out into the fields, grabbing all these like low-hanging peaches and like ripping into them philosophically. So, it's constantly questioning everything people say all the time.
and you have to, because and you hit a trigger word for me with when you said fact. Okay, because in this field of the paranormal, which includes ufology, cryptids, whatever you want to stuff under the paranormal umbrella, there seems to be so many people out there that are giving opinion as scientific fact or as true fact to any sort of phenomena. How dangerous is that as a researcher and a writer like you are to have people do that? Maybe even people you trust or you thought you trusted.
Yeah, it's I don't think it's a problem to sort of go out, especially in this field, to sort of say, this is a speculation I have, or this is an opinion I have, or this is a thought I've had, or a hypothesis. But to sort of then say, this is what's going on, or this is the truth behind sort of the obscurity of this phenomenon, or these are the facts. It's fundamentally dangerous, only because you're making claims ultimately that right now, at least as far as I've seen in my research, are unsupportable. I mean, if you really think about the entire UFO question, there's plenty of evidence to suggest something strange is definitely going on, right? Something sort of not normal, something paranormal is definitely going on. But to then make claims as to this is what that thing is, or this is, my hypothesis that it's aliens from this planet, or it's a hypothesis that they're interdimensional beings, or, my favorite, former MUFON state director who makes claims that they're demons. These are, they're making truth claims about something that they have no evidence really to support. The only evidence out there is that something really odd is going on, and we have no real idea what it is. We can have opinions, or we can have thoughts or ideas or hypotheses, and that's great so long as you state that. But to say that, this is 100% the case, come buy my book or come buy some crystals from me, that's now something shady's going on a little bit, Or you believe it outright, and then that's just delusion, right? Like you've convinced yourself that this is true without any sort of support behind it.
Well, it's funny. Yeah. It's funny you say that, because there is one big named ufologist out there. Starts with Doctor. I won't go any further. I actually politely declined my invitation that I sent to him because he had a list of demands on what it took to get him on the air, and then he would decide. Out of we have about 140,000 people a night that listen to this show. Okay, and one of the things, we're growing exponentially.
That's terrific.
And one of the things, I hope that didn't make you nervous.
I'm shaking now.
Exactly. No, but one of the things that upset me was, here he was with this list of demands of the do's and don'ts and what he needed to make the decision. And I politely said, no, I'm pulling back my information or my invitation to you, because when I think about it, and this is going to sound really, really lame. I'm just going to say it, lame. But you know what? I care about every member of our audience. I don't know them all. Okay, there's 100,000 that I don't know. But I do know my people on Twitter. I do know my people in the chat rooms. Okay? And I've bonded with them. And I thought of each and every one of them that before I did that, because I thought, what a disservice to my audience, because of these demands. And I thought, and even though some of them would love to have this guy on the air, I just can't do that. I take too much pride in this show and what my audience especially goes through every single night with me. They're committed. They are committed. So to bring him on because of that attitude that his thoughts are the only thoughts that matter, and then have to get a list of demands out that he will make. I mean, this isn't the Prime Minister of Canada or the President of the United States. This is a ufologist, much like you, much like other people who've come on this show to answer questions. And I just can't do that to the audience. I just can't.
So I just need to clarify, did this particular doctor recently release like a documentary? Just confirming. So we sort of know who we're talking about without actually saying it.
Yes,
Yeah. So, yeah, you know what? One thing I'll say, and obviously, you're right. You're 100% right. I think that there's certain people within this field who would consider themselves experts, right? And I think that we sort of see this all the time, especially if they get a TV show, or if they make a documentary, or they show up sort of in other documentaries or whatever. They're sort of often listed even in below their name. It'll say UFO expert, and I would really question them on what that means. Like, what do you mean by you're an expert in UFOs? Do you have access to some knowledge or some factual data that the rest of us don't have? And really, what makes you an expert in a field that currently has no answers whatsoever? It's one thing to be an expert in vacuum cleaners. You know what I mean? If you make vacuum cleaners, you build vacuum cleaners, you know how they work. You're basically an expert. To suggest that you're an expert on UFOs or any sort of paranormal subject, what are you basing this on? Like, what are you basing your expertise on? There's nothing for you to take apart. There's no vacuum for you to study. There's no UFO for you to study that you can be like, oh yeah, that's how it works, easy. And this is where they're from or whatever. So I agree with you. I think some people within the field have definitely given themselves a bit of have given themselves a significant pat on the back when maybe it's not necessarily warranted. So
it just disappoints me because, and I'm sure it does you, and I don't mean to personalize it. And here comes the Canadianism in us. I'm sorry for bringing this up, but do you find, MJ, that the ego gets way too involved in this? We could be combining so many great researchers together to come up with some sort of explanation to actually put that pressure on. I know Victor Vigiani is trying it in Toronto with the Alien Cosmic Expo. I know Stephen Bassett has been trying for 20 years to bring disclosure and push the U.S. government for disclosure of the UFO files in Washington, D.C., and he has built a team around it too. But at some point, do we not have to try and band more people together who are smart in this field to try and figure out what this phenomena is, to try and get those answers to a public level?
I have to be honest, I'm not sure, and I think that this is where definitely sort of my more critical and sort of philosophical bend comes in, because I definitely approach this field not necessarily as a believer, or not necessarily as someone who's sort of made assumptions about what's going on. Like I said before, I believe something strange is going on, but as to what that is, I have no idea. And the beauty about sort of working in philosophy is that I can sort of dabble in a whole bunch of ideas and not really commit to one, and try to find supports for those arguments and sort of try to knock them down as well simultaneously. It's like playing chess against yourself, right? So when it comes to banning people together, grouping people together, especially sort of people who are active in the field, I think you're going to come I think what you're going to bump into is a lot of people who don't necessarily agree with each other, right? And they're all very intelligent and they're all very clever and they all have something very important to say. The book that I wrote an essay for, which you mentioned in the intro, is UFOs Reframing the Debate. It's very much a book that has opinions and thoughts and ideas of a whole bunch of different people who don't necessarily all agree with each other. So a lot of the essays are designed to kind of fight with one another, and sort of we butt heads a lot over our different sort of ideologies and our different beliefs as to what the UFO phenomenon is. However, the what occurs as a result of that discussion, of this constant questioning and this constant back and forth, is something sort of quite rich and beautiful in that you have this spreading of ideas, this sharing of knowledge, and a group of people as well who have not necessarily committed to one thing or another. I wrote about this on my blog in one of my more recent posts. A lot of people within the UFO community are very much hung up on the extraterrestrial hypothesis as sort of what UFOs, sort of what causes UFO sightings, right? Aliens from another planet, for example, coming to Earth. And I recently wrote a post that sort of counters this idea. Why do we believe that it's aliens from another planet? Where do we have this data from? Like, why is this something that we assume to be true, or why do we sort of, if people have close encounter experiences, for example, why are they assuming that it's beings from another world versus something else that's potentially paranormal, whether it's just a unified consciousness or one intelligent entity that just manifests itself in different ways to different people. There's a whole bunch of different theories out there. So I don't know. I don't necessarily know if grouping people together and saying we should go do this sort of the way Bassett has done it. I'm not sure if there's I'm not sure if there's evidence to sort of support that would work in any sort of fundamental way. But I'm open to being disagreed with, because I have to be honest, that's just my opinion, and I don't really know if there is something behind disclosure, for example, or if there is something to disclose.
You know what, though? I like the idea that you actually said your opinion, because I think too many times we don't disclose that it is our opinion, and we give off information. Too many people give off information that it is absolute fact what is going on, when in reality we don't know. This leads me to the conspiracy side of everything, and I don't want everybody to run and grab the sheet of tin foil to make a hat here, but this is reality. There are things that we believe the government is covering up. There are things that we believe that the government knows about, whether it's crashed UFOs. We've had a couple here in Canada. Mm-hmm. We have also, people as, looking at the United States, we got Kecksburg, Roswell, just to name a couple. Okay. Shag Harbor in Nova Scotia. I believe there was one in your area in Manitoba, and when I look at it and I see all of these happenings on the conspiracy side, do you think that the government deep down is very familiar what is going on, or do you think they're as much in the clouds as we are trying to figure out what this phenomena is?
Sure. So I'll give you what I think, right? So this would be my opinion, and I am, again, making no sort of truth claim here. But I think, I think we can sort of, let's separate a few things. Let's kind of unpack this a bit. Is there evidence to support, and is there evidence to support the fact that the United States is engaged, or the Canadian government, or any government is engaged in sort of operations or secret projects that cost a lot of money that we have no idea about? Of course, right? This is sort of proven. When the United States government, for example, and the military can't account for nearly $1 trillion of its budget. I think this was maybe a couple of years ago, or at least one of the numbers was like roughly $1 trillion, and it sort of ranged between a few hundred billion to whatever. But literally, 25% of the military's budget is sort of missing. They can't account for where it went to. This definitely raises red flags. So, are there secrets? yes, there are secrets. To then take that step and say, those secrets contain, crashed flying saucers, for example, or alien bodies hidden in, a bunker, in Dugway Air Force Base, for example. There's a bit of a leap there. Do we have, historical incidents where something odd has happened, like something crashed, for example, like at Roswell or like at Shag Harbor? And can we sort of make a logical leap from saying, yeah, something for sure crashed there and it's 100%, an extraterrestrial craft? It does require a bit of a faith leap here, right? Like you can't just, because ultimately there's no evidence to support that claim, right? There's people saw something strange, and I don't take that away. People had an anomalous experience, and it did not make sense. But to then suggest that, the government then sort of hid it away and put it into a bunker and is now studying and is now developing sort of, alien reproduction vehicles, for example, and sort of going down that road, I don't know. I personally think the world governments have no idea what's going on. Do I think they might have some evidence or a little more evidence than maybe the civilian sort of UFO researchers have? Yeah, probably. They're a lot better at taking pictures than we are. They have a lot better access to better cameras and technology, and they can send, if something's up and something's giving off radar signals, they can put a fighter jet up there with a gun camera within a few minutes and snap photos of it. So they may have sort of interesting photographs or interesting video or something like that that would definitely, for I think the civilian groups, would be considered hugely important to the study of UFOs. Do I believe that they have sort of backroom deals and handshake agreements with alien species or bodies hidden in a basement? I don't know, man. That's, for me, I need to sort of get the logical steps there, and I really struggle with that. Do I think the American government or the Canadian government is worried about the UFO situation or the UFO phenomenon? I think they are. I think when you have hundreds of sightings coming in a year of people who see strange things in the sky, or when you get radar hits and you scramble fighters and you even have pilots communicating with each other, over American airspace, talking about, there's a bogey and they can't track it down and it's zipping around them like, they're flying, paper airplanes, and these things are, fighter jets or whatever, ripping around them like they're nothing. I think there's definitely concern, because the government then has to ask, one, what are they? But two, why can't we protect our own airspace? So I think that the question of disclosure and the question of conspiracy is a big one, and we start to make sort of leaps in logic and leaps in thinking in certain places, but I think some of those concerns are very real. I do think the governments are concerned about the UFO phenomenon, only because they don't have an answer for it. And when those pesky buggers tend to show up, they can never shoot one down, which would be, very helpful to them, I'm sure, if they could.
I'm not sure I fully agree. I do believe that the government knows more than what they are letting on. I also believe from my own experiences that we are being visited.
Right.
And I'll put it out there for our new listeners. I have seen 5 extraterrestrials with my own eyes.
And so this is the beauty of sort of the UFO discourse, right? Is because we can have a conversation like this and we can just, share our ideas here. And would you say then, Dave, that these extraterrestrials you saw, like, 100% that they came from another world, for example?
Well, I mean, when you see something that is 10 to 12 feet tall in the middle of the daytime, it sure as hell doesn't look human. I'm going to tell you that. Unless there was some Nephilim hiding in the backyard or in the forest behind my friend's farm. Right? And I'm a firm believer in that. And I would have never, ever... I'll tell you the story, okay? Because I'm just rambling here, but I'll quickly tell you the story.
I'd love to hear it.
Okay, around April 10th of 2014, I was at my friend's house. I was having a migraine, or what I thought was a migraine, only to figure out about half an hour later that it was actually shapes pulsating on my head. Started off as a square in the front of my head, went to the right side of my brain, or my head as a triangle, moved to the left side of my head as a circle. After the pain subsided, I got absolutely hit with an anxiety attack where I felt I had to go outside that moment. I needed to go. And my wife wanted to come out. I said no, she had to stay there with our son. My friend, who I no longer talk to and I never acknowledge her, okay, her husband, she says to him, Dave's picking something up. We need to go outside now. I turned to her and looked, and I said, he's not invited. This is his property. Been in his family's property for 41 years at that time. And I said, he's not invited. Don't know where that came from. So her and I went out. She was allowed. We walked to the back of the house to this old horse fence, said, out of God's peace, love, and light, can you please show us, you called us outside, can you please show us where you are? And 150 yards away from the neighbor's yard, and I spoke that in the exact same volume that I am right now. So 150 yards away, they're not going to hear that. Okay? And 150 yards away, the entire property in their neighbor's yard lit up like a Christmas tree.
Wow.
And this happened 3 times. 5 days later, I meet a young lady named Samantha Mowat, who is a frequent guest on this show. She's just been having some health problems lately, so she hasn't been able to come on. And she'll be skipping June as well. I just talked to her today, ladies and gentlemen, so we're going to have to wait until July before Samantha comes back on. I meet Samantha Mowat. 20 minutes after I meet her, she sees me getting antsy. She goes, what's going on? And I said, I got to go outside. I got to see where I'm trying to figure out this UFO puzzle that I saw. Okay? Because it was one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen. And we used to bring our dogs over there to run around. And I have 2 dogs, and the farm had 2 dogs. And they were running all around us in the back field, and Samantha and I are talking. She's quite intuitive. She picks up the energy of the ship. She's like, oh, they were pleasant. And I'm like, oh, okay, this is strange for me, because at this point I'm still quite skeptical. And she says to me, she turns and says, do you want to go in the back field, in the back forest? I feel there's something there. And I said, yeah. I took a deep breath, and I'm like, what the hell? I said, I just saw this UFO land here, talking to it on my command. It was turning the lights on. What the hell? You know, she goes, okay, you do realize that there's probably going to be something there that we see. And I'm like, yeah, I know. And now reality's hitting. And she goes, but from what I know, dogs or aliens don't like dogs, so I don't know if they'll be there. So we started the walk into the forest. The dogs are running way ahead of us, and the dogs run into the forest. And they're waiting for us, and we enter the forest, and we walk about 40, 50 yards in, and, you know, I'm paraphrasing what happened here. Samantha turns and looks and says, Dave, where'd the dogs go? All 4 dogs were gone. Don't know where they went. So we continued on because we're white people like that, and, you know, if there's something strange and eerie that's going to happen in a horror movie, we always keep going. We never turn back, you know. Yeah. And we kept going. We walked probably another 40, 50 yards in the forest, and Samantha turns to me and she says, okay, I want you to stop right here and look at me. And her tone just changed. And she goes, I want you to look that way. And she points north, 12 o'clock north.
Right.
And she goes, I want you to tell me what you see. So I took a deep breath, and I turned and looked, and I keep repeating the same thing. Samantha, what the F is that? Samantha, what the F is that? Because 200 feet in front of me, there is the 10 to 12 foot extraterrestrial staring right back at me and her.
Wow.
And this is 2 o'clock in the afternoon, not a cloud in the sky, and the odd part about it, not an airplane in the sky. And we were along Vancouver International Airport's flight line going to Vancouver, which was always busy. Plus, there was a very busy community airport around that area, too. And when you see something like that and it changes your life, it's amazing how all of a sudden your belief system continues to change, MJ, in regards to whether or not more people know about this. Now, I'm lucky. My experience that day was very benevolent. Very benevolent. But a lot of people don't have that. So I do believe that they are there. I do believe they are coming here. And I do believe that the government knows more than what they think. That's my opinion. Why wouldn't they cover it up? If they traded, if you go back to Eisenhower, remember all the doors we were talking about opening and closing earlier, if you go back to Eisenhower and believe that that conspiracy is true, that he met with extraterrestrials and traded humans for technology, it opens up an entire Pandora's box, does it not?
Well, of course it does. I mean, yeah, it does. I want to know where you're going with this. This is interesting.
Well, the Pandora's box is, if they know and they're taking technology and they're hiding it from everyday people like you, me, and our listening audience here, and those sitting at the NSA right now, hi, fellas and ladies, you know, you have to wonder, what is this all for? Why are they doing this? Why are they keeping people in the dark? Is it to oppress us? Is it to hide the military-industrial covert operation? Is it to control us? So there's a bunch of doors that can actually open with this. Would you agree?
Oh no, I definitely agree with you there. Like, I think that if there is a government conspiracy that is hiding the truth behind the UFO question, I agree with you. I think that one would be sort of probably one of the most potentially unethical situations the human race has ever dealt with, sort of from a government. But I think, like you said, right, you know, the idea that they would maintain power over sort of the rest of humanity by keeping this secret, or by, you know, trading people for technology, or whatever sort of whatever the narrative is, right? Whatever the idea of this conspiracy is, I agree. You would definitely open up a lot of problematic situations. However, you know, unfortunately, sort of like you mentioned, the Eisenhower, sort of the famous Eisenhower meeting, right, with the aliens. Apart from, you know, I think it was one man's story, who was a guard allegedly, right, who saw this happen. He was like a sergeant in one of the MPs or something who was present. You know, apart from his story, though, we have no evidence to support the fact that there is sort of this Eisenhower alien meeting. Like, and are we then able to make a truth claim based upon one man's story? And I'm not saying that to sort of disregard or to say he's a liar or not. I'm just saying for the rest of us who were not present in that moment, you know, we have to take sort of this man at his word. And there's not anything sort of wrong with that. But then for us to make truth claims ourselves about what's going on, it's not enough sometimes to just have one man's word in regards to a meeting. And then we can sort of extrapolate this idea, right, to other conspiratorial sort of meetings with aliens that have occurred, or crashed ships, or the collection of you know, crashed UFOs, and you know, all this testimony we have. You know, UFO studies or UFO discourse is full of stories. It is very much a discourse of stories. It's really all we have, because there's no sort of physical objective evidence. There's a lot of storytelling, and a lot of that storytelling is amazing. And I got to be honest, while I'm a skeptic, I consider myself a romantic skeptic, in that I have to be honest. I believe every word you're saying, Dave, in regards to your story. Like, it happened. For me though, to then change my entire worldview based upon your story, right? And change my entire philosophy of life based upon your story. You know, I need a little bit more than that, and I think generally people need more than that. You know what I mean?
Absolutely, but this also leads to conspiracy as well, because if you're questioning the government on this, you can question them on everything regarding, you know, things like Project Blue Book, things like the moon landing. Was it hoaxed or was it not? Have we been there? You know, there's so many different aspects that we could now question them on. It gets scary because now we don't know, you know, tinfoil hat getting tighter. We don't know what the truth is and what the truth isn't.
For sure. And I think that this really, and again, this is beautiful because I do write about this in the article, or in the essay for UFOs Reframing the Debate. I do write about the fact that, you know, one of the major components of UFO discourse, of the study of UFOs, is this really overhanging belief that we are being lied to by the authorities, right? Whether it's governments or whether it's sort of the military-industrial complex or whether it's corporations, you know, involved with the military or whatever, there's very much a huge component of the UFO question that really hinges upon this distrust that we have, and this mistrust rather that we have for the government or these sort of elite people in elite positions of power. And it would be interesting to think about what would the UFO sort of what would UFO culture and the UFO community be like if this didn't exist? If we had faith in our government or we believed in everything the government was saying, what would sort of UFO studies look like? You know what I mean? Like, how would it be different? And more importantly, how much of the conspiracy and the conspiracy theorizing, how much does that affect our study and our examination of UFOs? I think I can't remember who said it. It was one of, it was either Bassett or maybe it was Vigiani who said there's no point anymore at sort of investigating UFO sightings because we know they're here. So what's the point of like organizations like MUFON, right, to continually investigate lights in the sky, right? He sort of, I think they referred to it as sort of a useless endeavor. And this is an interesting claim because, you know, really it's the investigators on the ground and it's the witnesses on the ground who are really the bread and butter of UFO studies, right? It's the people who have had odd experiences, and it's the people who are investigating them, who are investigating these odd experiences that are really doing the frontline work. And for someone to kind of pull UFOs away from that, the study of UFOs away from that frontline work into this realm of government conspiracy, one, I think it's a bit of a slap in the face to the witnesses who have sightings, but I think it's also really it's really mistreating what sort of UFO studies is about, which is collecting these stories and helping people, especially understand that they're not the only ones who have had sightings, and they're not sort of these weirdos on the fringe, but rather they're sort of, you know, there's actually a lot of people who have had odd sightings, and there's actually a lot of people interested in the subject who are doing that investigation. So I like the you know, the conspiracy aspect is interesting to think about. However, until maybe something more comes out, especially in regards to the UFO question, like, do I think there's government conspiracies? For sure. Like I said before, right? There's a lot of black projects out there and skunk works out there that are being done. To, you know, a lot of money goes missing out of budgets, for example, for the U.S. military. But to link it then to kind of the UFO question, you know, I don't know. I'm hesitant a little bit. To sort of just say, yeah, 100%. Part of me maybe thinks so, you know. I might be a 60-40 kind of guy, but I'm not there 100% yet.
We only got about 3 or 2.5 minutes here before we got to go to break. I want to get to a quick question from BTO here in the Spreaker chat room. Yep. MJ, do you feel that the UFO phenomena is extraterrestrial, interdimensional, my lab, or maybe something else?
Yeah, so this is where I have to be honest, I really don't know. Because I don't think there's any evidence to support sort of any one theory over another. Like I think the extraterrestrial hypothesis is great because it makes logical sense. It's something we're kind of used to, sort of culturally. The ETH is sort of present, and not only that, you know, it sort of it really is kind of the vast majority of people in the study of UFOs really buy into that hypothesis. But then, in the interdimensional hypothesis or the psychosocial hypothesis or the co-creation hypothesis, which is sort of a new one developed by Greg Bishop, who's another UFO researcher, there's a lot of other hypotheses that address a lot of the loopholes that exist within sort of the extraterrestrial hypothesis. And I think that this is sort of where my interest, a lot of it really lies, is theorizing and exploring all of the different sort of pros and cons of each hypothesis. Like I said on my blog, I've addressed this a few times, talking about the different hypotheses out there and the issues that some of them have and why there's problems, sort of logical problems with them, as well as why they're good. So it's not. I don't know what I believe. In all honesty, I really have no idea.
I don't know either. I don't know. I think it's a mixed bag of everything going on. And unfortunately, there's people out there who know the truth, those who don't, and those who just wish the truth was their own opinion. And that's what's scary, MJ.
Yeah. This is true. It's scary or it's beautiful at the same time,
It is.
Yeah.
It totally is. And when we come back, we're going to get more into shutting down experiencers, like MJ said. We're going to get into disclosure. We're going to get to UFOs in Canada. I do want to mention just a couple of things. KJ, you're sitting in this. KJ Gandy, she is our Director of Business Development here at Spaced Out Radio. She hurt her ankle. Her dog tripped her on the stairs. Now she's in the hospital. We don't know if it's broken or not, so you have to update. Connor, happy belated birthday to you. Take care of Mom while you're out there, because we need her back working, getting us some radio stations, getting a business plan together. She's kind of important to us, Connor, so make sure if she needs a piggyback, you give it to her. Thank you. You're listening to Spaced Out Radio. I am your host, Dave Scott. We'll be back with more MJ Banias, UFOs over Canada. Coming up, hour number 2 next. Coming September 29th to October 1st, the first annual Spaced Out Radio Caribou Paracon. Hi, this is Dave Scott. The event will be held at the Spruce Hills Spa and Resort in 108 Mile Ranch, British Columbia. Come join us for an amazing weekend of speakers talking all things paranormal, UFOs, ghosts, aliens, Sasquatch, intuitiveness. Listen to great speakers like Miriam Delicato, Samantha Mowat, and the crypto guru Ronald Murphy. Get your VIP passes by going to spacedoutradio.com and clicking on the Paracon banner. Come to BC, where the paranormal is waiting for you.
From coast to coast to coast, Blacklight Uncharted is taking on the paranormal across Canada. From ghostly hauntings to the UFOs flying above in conjunction with MUFON Canada, we're closely investigating what's going on in the northern skies and checking out the apparitions that walk among us. Check out our videos right here at spacedoutradio.com. We want to know your thoughts, we want to hear your experiences, and we want you to share your stories. The answers are out there, and we intend to find them.
Would you like to become one of our space travelers? All you have to do is click on the Space Travelers icon at spacedoutradio.com. For only $5 a month, you can get access to some great prizes, as well as private monthly shows, newsletters, and a members-only section on our website. Become a space traveler today.
It's paranormal news at its finest. Welcome to The Encounter. At spacedoutradio.com, The Encounter online is SOR's trusted news source for everything weird and strange going on around the world. This is news editor Eric Markham. Our team of journalists are scouring the planet for those strange stories that rarely make the mainstream. No fear-mongering or fake news here. Head over to spacedoutradio.com and encounter The Encounter.
Hey, this is Canadian Paranormal Investigator Mike Moore. The third Wednesday of every month, I'll be teaming up with Dave Scott to bring you Ghosts of the Great White North. Each month, we will bring on guests from across Canada to discuss their ghostly encounters. Canada is a paranormal hotbed with stories you've never heard, so we're going to bring them to you. So get comfy on your Chesterfield, grab a donut, and join us, eh?
Have you had an experience you can't explain? Had a run-in with ghosts, maybe Bigfoot, or seen lights in the sky? Hi, I'm Mike Schmidt from the SOR Sightlines. I'm here to investigate your sighting. Head to spacedoutradio.com and fill out a report on the Sightlines. All your information is 100% confidential, and I will help you figure out what you've been seeing. File your report and let's find out the answers together.
Visit purpleplates.com today. For over 40 years, the Purple Energy Plates have been delivering amazing results for their many customers. Inspired by the great genius Nikola Tesla, the harmony, healing, and energetic effects of the plates have proven over and over to be beneficial and often miraculous to thousands of customers. With their money-back guarantee and the many benefits, how can you afford not to get one? Check their site for daily specials and choose from their many energy products. You won't be sorry. Visit them today at purpleplates.com for mind, body, and spirit, and expect a miracle.
Are you interested in advertising on Spaced Out Radio? Head to our website at spacedoutradio.com and click on our advertising tab. There, you will find an assortment of ways you can get your product out there with us, from radio commercials to banners and social media. Have a product you like our hosts to endorse? We can do that too. Visit spacedoutradio.com for more details.
Have you got your Cosmic Passport? If you need one, tune in to Cosmic Passport on Spaced Out Weekend. This is Elizabeth Anglin, ET experiencer, spirit medium, and host of Cosmic Passport. Each weekend I'll be bringing you interviews and support from other paranormal experiencers, and the best in intuitive spiritual guidance from across the globe. It's all happening starting at 9 p.m. Pacific Time, midnight Eastern, on spacedoutradio.com.
From British Columbia to Northern California, Pacific North Weird has Cascadia covered. Check out our feature videos at spacedoutradio.com, where I, Vincent Zunza, and my super sleuth partner Alexandra Sullivan track down the weird and strange stories from around the Pacific Northwest. From Bigfoot to Mel's Hole and everything in between. This is what makes life exciting. So why report the normal when we can report the Pacific North Weird right here at spacedoutradio.com.
Oh, there's only one way to rock. Loud and proud. In high definition. Radio 702 rocks. Las Vegas.
Every Saturday and Sunday night, as Dave Scott wanders aimlessly in the wilderness, you can come hang out with me, James Tyson, in Spaced Out Weekend. Starting at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern, I'll take you along as we talk with some of the best experts in their fields. SpacedOutRadio.com is the place to find us. So sit down, relax, put your feet up, enjoy the topics like the paranormal, supernatural, intuitiveness, and so much more. Hope to see you there.
Don't have time to listen to Spaced Out Radio live? Wherever you are, the car, the office, the shower, or even if you're traveling, we're right here for you. Each Spaced Out Radio show can be found on iTunes, TuneIn, and on our YouTube channel, Spaced Out Radio Show. It's the perfect way for you to catch up on our shows. For more information, just head over to our website, spacedoutradio.com, and tune in to us today.
The views and opinions expressed by tonight's guest and topic of discussion do not necessarily represent the official policy or position of Spaced Out Radio, Spaced Out Weekend, Spaced Out Radio Limited, its hosts, syndicated carriers, or anyone associated with this broadcast. Would you like to connect with us? Head to spacedoutradio.com for all your latest show info. And hit us up on Twitter using the hashtag Spaced Out Radio. Now, back to Dave Scott and SOR.
Welcome back to hour number 2 of Spaced Out Radio tonight. I am your host, Dave Scott. Good to have you along for the ride. Thank you so much for tuning in. Tomorrow night on the program, we get a little dark. Richard Spence is going to be with us. We're going to be talking the life of Secret Agent 666, Aleister Crowley. Preacher's going to join me on the air as well. So we're going to get into this tomorrow night at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern Time at spacedoutradio.com. If you want to follow us on social media, you can do so on Twitter at spacedoutradio. Give our Facebook page a like, Spaced Out Radio Show. Tune us in on TuneIn, download this show and others on iTunes. Our website is spacedoutradio.com, where we have a plethora of features for you, including joining the SOR Space Travelers Club for $5 a month. You can read up on the encounter online, but I highly suggest you be like Canadian Joe and pick up a Spaced Out Radio t-shirt. Because, well, we got them for sale. There's no other reason. You need one. If you're listening to this show, you need a Spaced Out Radio t-shirt. So pick it up at our website today. I want to welcome in everyone listening in on WQEE 99 Rock the Key down in Noonan, Georgia, home of The Walking Dead. We're also live in New Orleans on 107.7 FM, the United Public Radio Network, and over 160 countries around the world. We're live in Las Vegas on Renegade Talk Radio. We're also on KTLK, The Fringe FM, and on Revolution Radio. Remember, the Double R Machine is a donation station financed by you, the valued listener. Head on over to freedomslips.com and donate today. Bill Cardwell has set the password for tonight in the SOR Space Travelers Club. And oh gee, guess what? I don't know how to pronounce it. Chiaroscurist is your password for tonight. Use it wisely, Space Travelers, as Bill sets the password each and every night right here on the mighty SOR. Tonight we are talking with MJ Banias. He is a blogger, a researcher, critical thinker of the field of ufology out of Winnipeg, Manitoba. We're talking UFOs over Canada and so much more. His website, terraobscura.net. If you want to check it out, that's terraobscura.net. MJ, welcome back to the show.
Thanks very much.
Glad to have you, man. Glad to have you. Very Canadian answer. Thank you. Thank you very much.
And I apologize so far for everything I've said and everything I will say. Even if I... No, I'm just joking.
why don't we just pack up and go to Tim Hortons?
You know what? I agree. And if anyone bumps into us on the way, we're going to say sorry anyway. Right?
Exactly. Exactly. Because that's what we do around here. That's what we do around here. And you know what? I absolutely believe that there's a lot of interesting information going on being spread out around the world in regards to this phenomena, because we just don't know. And in this hour, we will end up focusing a little bit more on Canada. But in the last hour, we started to talk about how there's a lot of researchers out there right now who don't believe the experience and the experiencers' stories are valid to their research anymore, even though that's the true heart of the matter. And the more information you can get, I always thought, was more important. What is your theory on that type of critical thinking?
Well, yeah, there's a I'm not sure. Well, I should say he's infamous. One of a big guy in the UFO sort of research is a guy by the name of Red Pill Junkie. I'm not sure if you've heard of him, Dave. Red Pill Junkie. He's sort of a big UFO guy. You can probably Facebook him or Google him. He's an amazing UFO researcher, and the reason why I say that is because he's sort of the one who hit me over the head with the idea of you have to go to the witnesses. Like, you always have to go back to the witnesses, because they're really the ones who are helping piece together the puzzle. Even though the puzzle, like, every day keeps expanding and keeps getting bigger and more pieces keep getting added, at least they're the ones that are sort of they're the puzzle pieces that are stable and they fit, and they sort of paint the picture of what this UFO phenomenon is. And I think that, any UFO researcher who sort of looks at witness experiences, they run into sort of this weird mental gap. If the witness's experience doesn't fit into their own belief system, for some reason they just throw it out, that probably never happened, or that person's nuts, or they'll say stuff like that. Meanwhile, if a witness has an experience that kind of does fit into their own personal belief system, then suddenly that witness is sort of regarded as being honest or had a real experience versus sort of a fake one. So to sort of get to the answer to your question, we need to kind of draw a line in the sand, and we need to kind of decide, are we sort of pro-witness, or are we really opposed to the witnesses, and are we just going to try and jam their story and jam their experience into sort of the box that we've sort of formed? Like, you know, how before in the last hour you mentioned Pandora's box. In regards to, you know, some witness experiences, are we taking their experiences and trying to jam them into the Pandora's box and trying to make it fit, and, you know, like pieces of it are falling out the side and the box is cracking under the pressure? You know, ultimately, we need to, I personally believe, return to the witness. What did the witness experience? No matter how strange, no matter how odd, no matter how much it doesn't fit into our own personal worldview, to them, at least in that moment, it occurred, and potentially, sort of objectively, it did occur as well, right? For the rest of us, like it sort of happened. The tree fell in the forest just because no one was around to hear it, or just because one person was around to hear it. You know, it still made a sound, right? So I think this sort of witness bashing, this experiencer bashing, is really problematic. And there's a lot of researchers out there, definitely, who sort of are starting to play that game, because, again, like you said before in the previous hour, there's a bit of an ego boost out there, and it's kind of trying to prove your own opinion to be true so you can sell books, or you can attend conferences and do all that. And that's a dangerous game to play. The UFO question is not going to get answered by people who do that.
So when it comes to disclosure, do you think that we have a leg to stand on? Do you think that the public would be ready for any sort of disclosure that the government has on this information? We saw during the U.S. election John Podesta pushing the hell out of the media to ask Hillary Clinton about UFOs and what the government knows. You know, are we getting closer to disclosure, or are we just still in the same boat we were 20 years ago when Stephen Bassett hit up his claims?
Yeah, I honestly, I think we're sort of in the same boat. And I say that because, you know, for every day that, you know, again, if there is a conspiracy, if this secret is real, let's say, like objectively real, in that the government has, you know, actual evidence, let's say, every day they sort of keep it back is just another day that they're lying to the rest of us, right? And it, you know, in what interest, like what is it in the government's interest to suddenly admit that the lie is real, right? To admit that this is all real, and to admit that we've been lying this whole time. There's nothing really that's going to motivate the government to release any secret, only because I think most people now in disclosure, not all, Grant Cameron would be a huge exception, but I think most people within the disclosure movement kind of believe the president doesn't know anything anyway, and doesn't have access to any of this information anyway, right? These are all sort of special access programs and black budget secrets that are well above the president's pay grade. And, you know, the president is a term employee for the government. And these secrets are kept by people sort of in higher echelons of power. That's typically what you hear, right, within sort of the disclosure sort of narrative. So no, I honestly don't think any headway has been made. If there is a secret to reveal, I think it's going to stay secret for a long time. Really, it's going to have to be something major that's going to have to occur, like a big slip up or a leak, or it's going to have to be on the part of, you know, the intelligence itself, whatever that intelligence is, sort of coming forward, and a massive event occurring. Sort of, it doesn't have to be they land on the White House lawn, but, you know, another major incident where you have sort of thousands upon thousands upon thousands of witnesses, you know, video and news reports and all that to potentially force a hand. But again, you know, if the conspiracy goes that deep, you know, that may also never occur.
We have seen countries disclose before. Okay, there's a handful of countries that have released their files, their videos, their knowledge that we are being visited. So we know disclosure has already happened. Why do you feel then there is such an urge to get one of the big four or big five to disclose if we've already had it from smaller countries? And those countries that I'm talking about would be the United States, Great Britain, Russia, China, and Japan.
these are the countries that already have had disclosure.
Who haven't had disclosure.
Yeah,
but it seems like, let me clarify. It seems like we need those big five that I just mentioned to fully accept that we are being visited.
Yeah, so I agree with you. I agree with you. I think there's sort of, again, we have to sort of unpack this. The United States culturally, I think, is sort of the UFO hub. When you really think about the UFO question, when you really think about all aspects of sort of the UFO discourse and narrative, again, you look at it from a bird's eye view. The United States is really sort of the gatekeeper here of the modern UFO phenomenon. It's kind of all of the major incidents tend to happen there. There's a large contingent of people who sort of work within the UFO field. So yeah, I agree. I think no one's really going to accept anything until the United States shows up and does something and says, here's everything we have. The second part is a lot of, smaller countries have released their UFO information and said, here's all of the paperwork we have. I think there's a lot of people within the disclosure movement that would say, all that paperwork is just a front for something bigger. That they're lying about still, right? And I think that this is sort of a catch-22 that exists within disclosure, especially within the American disclosure movement. Anything the United States government releases, if it's not what sort of people want, they're going to look at that and say it's just a front. They're hiding something bigger. All of these documents are could be real, but it's just the tip of the iceberg. Or these documents are, some of the more interesting documents are potential forgeries, or they're just disinformation or misinformation to sort of throw us off the scent. They're going to throw us a few bones to pacify us, and suddenly here's disclosure. Meanwhile, the alien bodies are still in the bunker. So I think that this is kind of one of my big issues with the disclosure movement as a whole is the big question I ask is, how will you know you have actual disclosure? Like, what's going to motivate the government, especially in the United States, to disclose the fact that they have, let's say, alien technology? But more importantly, anything they give you, if it's not, here's the bodies for scientific study to civilian, scientific groups or whatever, is it not going to be good enough? And is the disclosure movement just going to say, well, this is just disinformation, we still need to keep pushing? And with that pushing, ask for more money and release more books and sort of line our pockets a little more, again, and there's the skeptic in me, right? But that's my concern sort of with disclosure. And I agree. I think the United States is kind of a big linchpin in all this, in disclosure itself, for sure.
See, here's my theory on this, and I'm curious to get your opinion. There's a couple reasons why I don't ever see disclosure happening, at least not in the near future. Number one, as long as religion runs this country, or North America, or the world, basically, because it does, okay, the religious sects will not allow this to happen, because we're going to have rampaging people questioning their faith left, right, and center. I could see a lot of dismay happening regarding that. And that isn't putting down religion. I know we have a lot of religious people who listen to this show. It isn't putting down religion, but there is the fear that if what we know due to our faith that is supposedly true is proven to be untrue because of this, that opens up, an entire realm of very uneasy times. Second, if we focus on the United States for a second, if the United States has been harboring alien technology for the betterment of the military-industrial complex, and they know about alien abduction and what's happening to people, could you not see that opening up, I'll use the term Pandora's box again, in regards to lawsuits and other happenings with its citizens? Because I could see a lot of people going absolutely haywire over this.
Yeah, I think the religious institution aspect, I think it's a big aspect. I don't think it's the linchpin in all this. And I've written a few articles again on my blog. It was called Feeling Alienated. That was the series, a 3-part series. I think the bigger problem with disclosure, and I think the bigger problem with sort of UFOs in general for, human beings on this planet is that the UFO question really contradicts how we govern ourselves, right? So I don't necessarily think like I said, I think the faith aspect is important, the religious aspect is important, but I think the sort of the economic variables here are significantly more important. And you see this all the time in the UFO community, talking about sort of free energy and alien technology as being highly advanced, and it would really free us from using fossil fuels, or it would free us from poverty and starvation and all of these other world issues we face. And I think that's the real problem here. And I not the problem, I think it's a good thing, but I think it's the real conflict for a government releasing its knowledge about the UFO phenomenon, is that it would totally throw our entire sort of world economic system sort of out the window. I think you would really see the end of capitalism as a system, because it would become unnecessary. I mean, if you have the ability to access sort of unlimited energy, in that you can power a vehicle to travel sort of between stars, this would obviously require some pretty fundamental technology here. Why would you need to buy gasoline anymore? Why would you need to pay for your heating bills? Why would you need to go to the grocery store and sort of buy food off a shelf that's produced in factories which burn fossil fuels and use trucks which, like, it would totally throw out the entire economic system of this planet, not just how you buy things, but really how things are traded. It would really call into question sort of government borders. It would call into question sort of national sovereignty. It would call into question the fact that human beings own the planet, which we sort of assume we do, right? Like, philosophically, we kind of sit here and we kind of say, yeah, humans are kind of the ones in charge. We're really the only species on this planet that sort of can claim ownership over it, in a sense. And saying that there's this other out there, right? This sort of intelligent other, whatever that other is, would totally reshape our entire perception of not only the way we live our lives, but also of ourselves as a species within the universe. We would no longer be sort of sovereign owners of sort of intelligence and the planet. We would be a voice, potentially in a chorus. And are humans good at sharing? That's another fundamental question. Ask my daughter, she's 1.5, she would sort of disagree. She says sharing is stupid. I want to ride the yellow duck now, Dad. And it's like, yeah, push the other kid off then. No, I'm just joking. But I think that the UFO question really challenges this idea. And I think that this is why, we don't really like to talk about UFOs a lot in pop culture, right? Why news doesn't cover it very much, and why it's sort of considered a fringe and taboo subject is because it definitely questions our entire way of life. Go ahead.
Do you think then, in what you just said, do you think the public fear is maybe what keeps the government from saying maybe disclosure isn't a good thing?
No, I have to be honest. I don't think necessarily public fear. I think humans are, we're generally good at adapting to things. You know what I mean? I think humanity has sort of proven through history that in massive conflict and in massive sort of shifts, whether it's sort of climate or whether it's political shifts or whether it's sort of literally like physical warfare shifts, like changes and adjustments, humanity throughout history, we're highly adaptable. So I don't think it's sort of the public that would have the problem. I think if aliens landed tomorrow and they said, hey, we've been here for, so many years and we're going to share our technology with you, the one condition is you need to stop blowing each other up. And you need to basically feed the world, stop being stupid. I think ultimately humans would be fine with that. I think we'd be like, hey, that's great. I think the problem lies in really those who have positions of power. If you tell someone who runs, a massive conglomerate whatever major corporation or they run, they're within sort of the corridors of power, let's say, to suddenly say, listen, you're going to lose a lot of your power. In fact, you're probably going to lose a whole bunch of it because everything you've built for yourself is now meaningless and worthless. That's going to be a problem, especially to someone or to groups of people who have really been running this planet for a long time. And if you really look at sort of the structure of capitalism that's sort of occurred since sort of the end of World War II, 1950s onward, especially into the 1980s and 1990s, with the fall of sort of the Soviet Union and sort of the expansion of capitalism now into sort of the global system. There really is there's no other economic system really that exists. Everything is governed by capitalism. To go to those people who have been sort of running the show for a long time economically to say, yeah, your money's no good anymore, or this wealth you've amassed is now sort of fundamentally meaningless because it has to be it's not going to be shared, but just the way the technology is that we are sort of bringing to you as this other species, you're going to have to share because ultimately no one's going to care about you anymore, or no one's going to think you're important, or no one's going to really do what you want anymore because you don't really hold the purse strings of the planet anymore. These are the people who are going to have a problem, right? These are the people who are going to have an issue with this fundamental shift in ideology away from, I have to wake up in the morning, I have to work my job, and then I have to, pay my bills, and I have to buy gasoline, and I have to buy food, and I have to buy stuff, and then I have to go to bed, and I do the same thing over and over again every day, and I sell my labor for money, and whatever. Like, if that goes out the window, the entire economic system goes out the window, and the potential of let's say ET technology, if it exists, it would do that, right? It would totally disrupt everything. The entire system of government and I think economics would sort of shift dramatically. You and me, I don't think we'd have a problem with it. I think we'd probably think it's great. I mean, you and I would never have to pay, heating bills ever again. And I live in Winnipeg, so I got to be honest, in the wintertime, running a furnace costs a lot of money, and if I don't have to pay for that anymore, that'd be great.
I know the feeling, man. My wife went through 10 cords of wood this year for our wood stove. 10 cords. I chopped every one of those, and we ran out of wood at the end of February.
There you go.
And it's still cold up here.
Yeah. Meanwhile, they drop off a little box, and it uses 0 point energy to heat your house for free forever. You're like, wood. I don't need it. But for me, I pay Manitoba Hydro, but that's natural gas that comes from probably somewhere in Alberta. You know what I mean? And who owns those oil companies out of Alberta that creates all that natural gas? Probably some massive Chinese conglomerate. Really, when you look at kind of where, like, who's heating my house right now, it's probably not some guy from Alberta. It's probably some massive corporation operating somewhere out of Beijing that generates, billions and billions and billions of dollars a year in income. If that suddenly went away, that would be problematic for that guy who owns that company or the people who have shares in that company. It wouldn't be problematic for me. It would be great for me. So I think that's kind of the big angle when it comes to why disclosure, if there's something to disclose, why it won't happen, as well as I think sort of the general anxiety about UFOs is that it would really call into question our sort of place in the universe as well as on this planet, but also how we run our lives on a day-to-day basis. That's a long-winded answer for your question, I think, though.
Perfect. Let's get to some audience questions here. This one comes from Rahonda, and she is asking, given the state of the world, what must, in your opinion, the extraterrestrials think of us here on Earth?
Yeah, wow. I think the it's a very human question, and I think it's a very human way to look at the question, right? Do they think about anything at all? That's sort of question one. And do they think human-like thoughts, right? Like, do they look at us and say, oh, we're barbaric, or we're barbaric at times, but we have great moments of love once in a while? Like, these are very human ideas. If let's say, as some people within the UFO community believe, love is sort of this universal concept that exists throughout the cosmos, and that, humans being just another facet of sort of intelligent life in the cosmos. I think if the extraterrestrials sort of are like us, they think like us, I think they would probably look at us and probably say, we were like them once too, right? This sort of barbaric race that tends to squabble over useless things, like money or like oil or 500 years ago, like gold or spices or tea or whatever, right? Like we squabble over dumb stuff that we deem important right now, but really in the grand scheme of things, are really dumb. Mm-hmm. Again, though, that's assuming they think like you and I. And I'm not sure if there's evidence for that, because a lot of times people have, experiences with extraterrestrials that are totally unethical and immoral and frightening, right? Like the abduction experience is not something that a peaceful alien race would sort of engage in, right? Like if they were looking out for our best interests, let's say, and they were looking down on us, and then they just kind of pick us up like cattle and probe us and use our reproductive organs for their own hybridization programs, let's say, or whatever. I mean, I would say that maybe we're the ethical ones then, if they believe that's okay, right? And maybe they're totally unethical. Maybe they look at us as just like meat, and we're here to be sort of consumed by them. We're just another byproduct in the universe that they're just going to use it because for their own personal gains. Maybe they're better capitalists than we are, So I don't know. To answer that question, there's a lot of sort of other little questions, right? Other, like you say, Dave, right? You open one door and there's a whole bunch of other doors. That question, is that opening that one door and suddenly there's like 10 other doors we can go through potentially here.
Right. Let's get to Gail's question, and she is asking, maybe I misunderstood, but MJ, are you saying that you don't believe in aliens and UFOs?
Yeah, Gail, I answered your question in the feed, but ultimately, it's not that I believe or I don't believe. I just don't know. I don't know what's going on. Do I think something strange is happening? Yes. This something strange is for sure happening. You have countless people contacting, UFO investigators around this planet saying these are their experiences that they've had. So definitely something odd is going on. The source of what that is, where it's coming from, what it is, I have no clue. So it's not that I believe or I don't believe. I just simply don't know. But like I said, something odd definitely is happening.
Moving on here. In regards to Canadian UFOs, our American listeners, and there's the majority of them, about 75% of our audience is from the United States. Do you believe that we up here in Canada have experienced some great UFO phenomena? And, we talked a little bit about Shag Harbor as being Canada's Roswell. Do you believe that we pay enough attention up here to what is going on in the field of ufology?
So, being Canadian, I'm going to have to maybe alienate your American audience a bit. But I think Canada has two of the best UFO cases that I would say make Roswell look like a Bush League UFO incident. And those two those two UFO events are the Shag Harbor UFO incident and the Falcon Lake incident, which and the reason I say it is because the amount of documentation that exists for these two UFO events is immense. We have so many files and so many records in regards to these UFO events. We have more official witness testimony. We have more sort of police documentation, military documentation on these incidents. They were investigated by Blue Book. Like Shag Harbor and Falcon Lake are probably the two best documented UFO cases in history. And for some reason, Roswell gets all the attention. And I personally don't know why. And I don't know why the Shag Harbor UFO sort of the anniversary is coming up, and I don't know why they struggle to get funding where, the events at Roswell are like insanely well attended, and they have tons of money being thrown at them at all times. Whereas when you try to do something here, no one really pays attention, even though these cases are, like I said, so well documented, and they're not hyped. But the facts that sort of exist around these cases, for any UFO researcher, it's like a wealth of information. For anyone who's sort of interested in UFOs, to look up these two cases, you'll get flooded with data, and you're just like you're like a kid in a candy store, right? Like you're like, whoa, look at all this stuff. And Roswell really hinges upon a couple newspaper articles and a redaction from the newspaper saying that it wasn't a flying saucer, and then some witness testimony, and some purported documents, the MJ12 documents that are kind of we're not really sure if they're real or not. So yeah, I think that it's a real problem for us in Canada that a lot of our cases don't get sort of the recognition they deserve, compared to a lot of the American cases.
Let's discuss those cases, because there's still a lot of people who are not familiar with them. Let's talk Shag Harbor, if you can break that down for us.
Sure. So Shag Harbor is a small little fishing village that's outside of Halifax in Nova Scotia, so East Coast Canada. And it was an evening in 1967 where basically the town was sort of woken up. It was a town of about 500 people, was woken up by this sort of, I guess it was sort of reported as a loud sort of hissing noise followed by sort of a crash sound, like a bang sound. A whole bunch of people sort of woke up in the middle of the night, I think it was about 2 a.m., and a bunch of people were awake, and I guess they sort of saw this light sort of zip through the sky and slam into the bay. So Shag Harbor, like I said, is a fishing village. It's right on a bay, and just so this massive light just slams into the water in the ocean just outside the bay. And this huge crowd sort of gathers at the docks and watches this light float on the water for about half an hour. And they bring out telescopes, and they thought it was a plane crash actually at first. So a whole bunch of the guys got into their fishing boats and like just head straight out towards the light. They called the local RCMP. So for the American listeners, that's our Royal Canadian Mounted Police. I guess it'd be equivalent to, I guess, of the FBI would be sort of the RCMP. They're sort of the federal government's sort of police force, called the local detachment, and they went out there and they had to basically commandeer a whole bunch of other fishing boats, and the Coast Guard went out. And by the time sort of people managed to get to the light, it started to sort of fade away, and then it disappeared under the water. And they started looking for, crash survivors, right? They thought it was a plane crash, and they found nothing. No wreckage, not a single thing was found. So police investigated. The police couldn't find anything, so they sort of called, like I said, the Coast Guard. They called in the Canadian Navy. They called in the Air Force. And literally, it was like a 3 or 4 week investigation was done to try and figure out what this thing was. No planes were reported missing. And it's really just a massive mystery. But the beautiful thing is that, all of the witness testimony, all of the government records are all public. So you can access, every single little file about this incident from, various reports from RCMP officers to like the Navy reports on what their divers were doing and where they were looking. And it's all sort of there. So Shag Harbor is sort of one of the best cases out of Canada for sure. And it's still sort of unknown. It's one of it's listed as unknown still. Like nobody really knows what crashed in the water, even though, 100 people or a couple hundred people saw this thing floating in the water. So it's an interesting case, that's for sure.
A couple of interesting features on that were military divers actually went down to see the craft, and one actually reported that they saw some sort of being working on fixing the craft with some sort of weird technology. Do you remember that?
I've read a lot of the information about Shag Harbor. I've never heard that particular story. I've heard others, though. I've heard that a lot of the fishing boats a couple weeks later started to go out and sort of, not snoop around, but they kind of, started to hang around the Canadian naval vessels that sort of allegedly formed a circle around in the water. Like the way the ships set themselves up is they almost like created a little mini blockade that was perfectly round. And these fishermen were going out and they were basically told, like, come any closer and we're going to shoot you out of the water. Because I guess the belief was that something was going on down there, and the Navy was trying to pull whatever it was, out, I guess, and haul it somewhere. But apparently the story gets interesting because the American Navy shows up. I think an American vessel American Navy shows up to start, I guess, helping. And apparently there was one or two American vessels present as well in this massive dive operation. So who knows? Maybe the Americans got themselves involved. Maybe they have it. I don't know. But I've never heard the story about the diver seeing the being. That's an interesting one.
And the other interesting part about that is the event at Shag Harbor happened on October 3rd. And three months previous to that, because it was Canada's centennial year, Paul Hellyer, the Minister of Defense, was in a town in Alberta actually standing on a UFO pad that the town created.
St. Paul. Right.
In St. Paul, Alberta.
Yeah.
Standing on a UFO pad saying, "Welcome to Canada," on there, in the most Canadian way, building a UFO pad.
Yeah,
and yet, at that point, he was still quite skeptical over everything.
It's like Canada, right? Like, we build a landing pad for UFOs. That's us, right? Like, that's so quintessential. And I have to be honest, if they came and said, "Yeah, we're invading you guys," Canadians would just apologize, be like, "You know what? Sorry, we're on your land." You know what I mean? Like, sorry, you can have the planet. We're sorry. We're just going to go and be at the Timmies.
Or a hockey game. One of the two.
Yeah, we'll probably be at the hockey game.
Yeah. Well, your Jets and my Canucks aren't doing too well.
No. It's just a bunch of American teams in the Stanley Cup.
I know. Canadian players, though, we got that. And we're clinging to that for life, man. We're clinging to that for life. Yeah. Absolutely. But let's talk about Paul Hellyer for a second, because, he's 93, 94 years old now. Yeah. And to this day, he is the most recognized, highest political authority to come on out and specifically say extraterrestrials are real. And they are here, and the ships are real. Before I ask you about his history, I'm curious who you think the next Paul Hellyer is, because, let's face it, he's coming up to that century mark. He's going to start, winding down and eventually passing away.
Right. The next one's tough. I'm not sure if Canada necessarily has someone sort of waiting in the wings to replace Paul Hellyer. Do I think that you might see, after Podesta kind of runs his political career, to its end, and now he's got some time on his hands, maybe he'll kind of, take over that mantle of being sort of like the guy who was always in the know is now kind of giving a tell-all. I personally take sort of issue at times with Paul Hellyer, only because I think there's sort of very little scrutiny that he kind of provides in what he says or what he believes before he says it. So I respect the man in the fact that, he held one of the highest positions in the Canadian government, and I have nothing but respect for that. But I think sort of from the UFO question, he is one of those guys who kind of plays that dangerous game of says, this is what is happening and these are the facts. Meanwhile, he has no real evidence to back up his facts that he's making claims about, right? He doesn't really say, in my opinion, this is what's going on, or this is what I think is going on. He says, this is what's going on, and you can trust me because I used to basically be the Minister of National Defense for the Canadian government. I get concerned. You know what I mean? I get a little concerned with Paul, Mr. Hellyer. What do I call him? What's his official title? I call him his
Hellyer.
Honor? No.
Hellyer.
No, I know, but
right honorable.
Right honorable. That's what with his honorableness.
Exactly.
I get jittery, right? I mean, he's openly said that, like, I think blue aliens attended one of his lectures and they were sitting there or something and they were dressed as nuns. Like some of the things that he states are, like I said, right? There's a lot of speculation. And again, maybe it's true, but I don't have evidence, or he's not really providing any evidence to support it in any real way that's measurable. So I get jittery with some of the things he says, and I don't know if it's an age thing or he actually believes it. Like I don't know, but that's my thought. But I think it's gonna be Podesta. He's gonna be the next one, I think.
Let's talk about Podesta. Were you as surprised as I was when he let out his tweet on February 13th, 2015, saying that his biggest regret was not securing the hashtag disclosure of the UFO files, hashtag the truth is still out there? And the point that I mention that is the media did nothing with that. And here you have the president's right-hand man saying, I can't get them. They're there. I can't get them. I'm sorry. And the mainstream absolutely drops the ball on that. I was stunned. I was amazed. What's your opinion on that?
That's, again, it's a tough one, right? Podesta is very publicly kind of the UFO guy, right? And not only that, he's very much into UFOs, sort of pop culturally as well. I mean, one of his birthday parties, I think, was like an X-Files themed birthday. So he dressed up as like Fox Mulder, and the entire theme of his birthday was an X-Files theme. So he's very much kind of publicly amongst his friends and sort of people who know about him, he is kind of just into that stuff. So when he tweets that, you have to kind of view it from the perspective of the news media outlets who are saying, well, is this him just, being cute? Because, he's a grown man and he has themed birthday parties. Like, let's be honest. Is he just sort of being cute in this moment? However, on the other side, if you look at sort of the WikiLeaks emails that recently came out concerning sort of Tom DeLonge and his project with the secret machines, and sort of all of his contacts that he has in the military and sort of high ups in various sort of established, I guess, corporate or commercial sort of areas that I guess are involved with military projects. That really kind of opens the door to a lot more questioning. Podesta's really heavily involved in the UFO discourse, but he's very much from the shadows, right? Like he's not really public in the sense that he writes about it or he sort of says this is what I think. He's not really public in the sense that he sort of goes out and really digs into the UFO question. He kind of does it from the shadows, and you really need to wonder how big those shadows are that he's kind of casting in the UFO world. And I think they're quite large. I think Podesta is definitely a player in the UFO game. Like I said, I think he plays very secretly and very quietly, maybe because he has to, just because of his position. But I think for him, a good cover would potentially be, I'm the guy who throws X-Files themed birthday parties for myself, so I'm able to kind of dwell in sort of two worlds. He can be the president's right-hand man, and yet still sort of he can be the president's right-hand man and not be considered sort of this fringe maniac who believes in UFOs and holds the keys to the country. So maybe he's sort of doing this purposefully. Maybe he's kind of playing this game of being like, I'm going to be cute, because that throws kind of the dogs off of the fact that I'm a major player in this. But that's the conspiratorial side of me. Apart from that, the media doesn't typically pick up UFO stories. It's not in their best interest, I think. Like I said before, right, the UFO phenomenon and the culture of sort of the subculture of the UFO community it sort of directly contradicts what the media's purpose is, right? The media's job fundamentally is to sort of promote the status quo of culture, right? It's designed to promote sort of the current economic system. It's designed to sort of promote the current political system. It's designed to make, us in the West sort of look a certain way, and it's designed to make sort of our enemies elsewhere, the others, sort of look a certain way. You know what I mean? Like, it's designed to promote sort of ideology, and UFO discourse and the UFO subculture very much calls into question the role of the media, and it very much calls into question, is the media telling us the truth, or are they part of this conspiracy? So I think the media is hesitant to run UFO stories, primarily because they often sort of lead people down paths of questioning the media and being critical of the media, which is interesting, right? Because we're having a discussion of why the media has not picked up these stories, right? So it's sort of a catch-22 in that, within the criticism is our criticism. I don't know. This is philosophical. I'm getting confused. But it like I said, it's not in their best interest to carry that story, which is why you really see UFO stories only getting picked up by very, very small local media stations, right? Like the smallest, local, like I said, community-based, municipal news agencies and newspapers are really the only ones who carry UFO stuff, or anything really. That's sort of odd and strange, but UFOs particularly.
Let's learn about Falcon Lake, because I can tell you right now, even as a Canadian who researches this, I don't know much about Falcon Lake.
Yeah, and here's a great example, right? Like, this is a UFO case that got a few national headlines when it came out, but really locally was huge. I mean, it still is. I mean, the 50th anniversary just occurred a few weeks ago, and our local newspaper carried it. It did go national at one point when it was carried on the CBC website. For the American friends, that's the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, but apart from that, it sort of remained very local. But it is one of sort of the best UFO cases out there. So do you want me to get into like a brief overview?
Yeah, please. So we got you got about 5 minutes before we go to break, so just run with it.
Sure. So basically what happens is in 1967, he was a geologist by the name of, it's the last name that always throws me off. It was Frank Michalak, I believe was his name.
Very nice pronunciation there.
Thanks. I think that's how you say it. Frank Michalak. It's Polish.
Michalak.
Yeah. So anyway, he's a sort of an amateur geologist, and he goes out to a provincial park we have here called Falcon Lake. It's beautiful, and it's just basically woods. That's all it is, just miles and miles and miles and miles of woods. And he's out sort of out in the back bush looking for rock samples and trying to find gold. He's like a rock guy. And he's sort of in this clearing, and all of a sudden he sort of sees this thing come out of the sky, this sort of round saucer-like object literally just sort of appears over this clearing. He gets scared and hides behind a rock. This thing kind of descends down and sort of lands in this clearing. He sits and hides. Like this thing's just sitting there, and it's freaking him out. And he sits there for about 40 minutes behind this rock, like watching this thing, and all it's doing is sitting there. And in fact, he has enough time. He pulls out a little piece of paper and he sketches out what it looks like, and he sketches out kind of where everything is. And he has a really a long time to really get a lot of information about it just by looking at it. And again, all of this is public, so you can go online and you can see his original drawing. You can see sort of his thoughts on it as he was sort of sketching it out on this piece of paper. And anyway, after about 40 minutes, he builds up the courage to sort of approach this thing. And I got to meet his son, actually, which was really cool. And his son, his name's Stephen, told me that his dad never thought it was like a flying saucer. He thought it was an American orbital craft that sort of crash landed in the middle of Manitoba. So he thought, he was gonna go up there and basically knock on the door and be like, and literally when he did go up, he literally said the word, like, "Do you Yanks need any help?" Because as he's approaching this craft, he sort of puts his hand on it. And as he puts his hand on this sort of large, round silver craft, a door opens. He says it opens like a camera lens, right? Like one of those cat eye lenses, right? So it doesn't slide in one direction, but it kind of opens in sort of multiple directions, like a circle. And he has his hand on the side of the ship, or whatever this thing is, and he leans in, and he calls in, like, "Do you Yanks need any help?" Or something to that effect. I'm paraphrasing. And as he's doing that, he sort of looks inside, and all he sees is lights. Like, it's just the inside of this thing is just lights flickering and blinking, and it's just like this chaotic jumble of lights. And he says he hears sort of two voices, quite high-pitched, almost sounding like children. At this point, though, he realizes that his hand is really hot, and he sort of takes his hand off of the craft, and he was wearing gloves, and they were totally melted. Like the leather and the rubber of his glove was like totally fused together, and it was like his glove was exposed to extreme heat. So he sort of is perplexed by this moment, not really sure what's going on. All of a sudden, the door closes sort of very quickly in front of him, and the craft spins almost like 75, 90 degrees, like in a circle. And what occurs next is sort of the most famous part. He looks down and he sees what looks like a vent, like a grill vent. And it's strange because it's sort of these round holes, almost like a sewer vent, except it would be with round circles. And the thing shoots out this hot steam, and it burns him. And in fact, you can go see photos of him in the hospital with these sort of burn marks on him that are in this odd pattern. The thing then sort of takes off, sort of up, like sort of straight for a bit, and then straight up and disappears into the sky. He's sort of thrown flat on his back. And he's no idea what's going on. Like, he's totally in shock. And it takes him sort of several hours to get out of Falcon Lake Park back onto a highway, where he's picked up by a police officer who thinks he's drunk. And he gets home, and then he goes to the hospital because he's having, like he's throwing up. And
MJ, I'm going to get you to hold on there. We're going to finish this story right after the break, because we are right against it right now, and I don't want to miss anything, because when that theme music comes on, it gets a little annoying. I'm not going to lie. So, when we come back, we're going to finish this intriguing UFO story at Falcon Lake, Manitoba. I'm hearing this for the first time, just like you. So I hope you're enjoying it. MJ Banias is our guest tonight on the mighty SOR. You can check out his website, terraobscura.net, if you want to check it out. We're going the distance with MJ tonight, so it's going to be a lot of fun as we continue talking UFOs, aliens, the agenda. Where's your tinfoil hats, people? You got to get them on for hour number 3, because we'll be back right after this break. Looking for a great weekend getaway this fall? Hi there, this is Dave Scott. Come on up to the heart of British Columbia for the first annual Spaced Out Radio Caribou Paracon, being held at the Spruce Hills Spa and Resort in 108 Mile Ranch, British Columbia. Speakers from all over North America are coming to discuss Bigfoot, UFOs, ghosts, and intuitiveness for the 3-day event, September 29th to October 1st. For more information, go to spacedoutradio.com and click on the Caribou Paracon banner and book your tickets today. Come to BC, where the paranormal is waiting for you.
The SOR Sightlines is a place for you to find answers to your strange experiences. Hi there, this is Mike Schmidt. If you have had an encounter with ghosts, UFOs, Bigfoot, ETs, or anything else that doesn't make sense, head to spacedoutradio.com and file a Sightlines report. All information you give is 100% confidential, and I will personally help you find the answers you need. SOR Sightlines, your answers are a click away.
Have you got your Cosmic Passport? If you need one, tune in to Cosmic Passport on Spaced Out Weekend. This is Elizabeth Anglin, ET experiencer, spirit medium, and host of Cosmic Passport. Each weekend I'll be bringing you interviews and support from other paranormal experiencers, and the best in intuitive spiritual guidance from across the globe. It's all happening starting at 9 p.m. Pacific Time, midnight Eastern, on spacedoutradio.com.
Hi there, I'm Butch Witkowski, lead investigator with U4Cop. On the final Monday of every month, you can listen to me and host Dave Scott on Spaced Out Radio's Strange Days. We're going to get to the heart of the matter when it comes to what's happening out there. People are seeing and experiencing things from ET contact to Bigfoot, and I want to hear about it. Your experiences are what we investigators need to help solve these unknown mysteries. So tune in at spacedoutradio.com to the final Monday of every month from Butch Witkowski's Strange Days.
This is your medium, Joanna, from Spaced Out Weekend, 2 mediums and a large. I would love it if you would come and join us with host James Tyson every other Sunday on Spaced Out Weekend. Together, we will take your calls and your questions live. Our goal is to provide you with a positive outlook on deep questions that you may have. Questions regarding love, relationships, money, or whatever else is on your mind. Come and check us out at spacedoutradio.com.
This is Eric Markham, news editor for the Spaced Out Radio's The Encounter Online. We have put together a great team of writers and journalists from all over the world to bring you top-quality paranormal stories. From alien encounters to the latest conspiracies, you won't find any of that fake news here. True stories and top-notch reporting as we look to bring these experiences to the mainstream. The Encounter Online, only at spacedoutradio.com.
Patrolling the Pacific Northwest, we are always on the lookout for the strange and unassuming stories that real people are experiencing. Hi, I'm Vincent Zunza from Pacific North Weird. Me and Alexandra Sullivan have teamed to bring to you those odd stories that never seem to make it into the mainstream. Stories so weird that will leave you scratching your head wondering, is this real? It's as real as it gets with Pacific North Weird. You can watch our videos right here at spacedoutradio.com.
Become more intimate and interactive with Spaced Out Radio. Join our Space Travelers Club with your new membership. For $5 a month, we'll provide you with special access to the website, monthly prize draws from books to psychic readings, along with monthly newsletter, private interviews, and more. Sign up today to be part of Spaced Out Radio's experience.
Looking for a place to advertise at a very reasonable cost? Look no further than Spaced Out Radio. SpacedOutRadio.com has an advertising tab that you can click to check out our daily, weekly, and monthly packages to play on the radio, or our website including social media. From commercial spots to banners, we have it all. Check out our competitive pricing today.
Don't have time to listen to Spaced Out Radio live? Wherever you are, the car, the office, the shower, or even if you're traveling, we're right here for you. Each Spaced Out Radio show can be found on iTunes, TuneIn, and on our YouTube channel, Spaced Out Radio Show. It's the perfect way for you to catch up on our shows. For more information, just head over to our website, spacedoutradio.com, and tune in to us today.
You hear footsteps in the empty room above you. A rocking chair begins rocking by itself. Don't be afraid of the things that go bump in the night. Reach for Spirit Storybox, the iPhone app the Huffington Post UK called the only ghost hunting app you will ever need. Spirit Storybox. The spirits are telling their stories. Are you listening?
Strange creatures lurking in the night, the sounds of wood knocking in the forest, odd happenings right out of a fictional world. These are the reports I love. Hi there, this is author Ronald Murphy, and I would love it if you join me and Spaced Out Radio host Dave Scott the second Wednesday of every month on our journey into the unknown land of cryptozoology at spacedoutradio.com. From Mothman to Frogman and everything in between. Hey, they don't call me the crypto guru for nothing.
Did you know that Spaced Out Radio runs 7 days a week? Hi, it's James Tyson from Spaced Out Weekend. Every Saturday and Sunday night, starting at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern, you can join me and my guests for some great chatter about what's going on out in the universe, or even in that dark part of the basement you really don't want to go back into. Well, let's find the answers to your experiences together. So come on up to Uncle Jimbo's cabin on the weekend. For more information, look us up at spacedoutradio.com.
The views and opinions expressed by tonight's guest and topic of discussion do not necessarily represent the official policy or position of Spaced Out Radio, Spaced Out Weekend, Spaced Out Radio Limited, its hosts, syndicated carriers, or anyone associated with this broadcast. You're listening to Spaced Out Radio with Dave Scott. Follow Dave on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio and hashtag Spaced Out Radio, and on Facebook Spaced Out Radio Show. Now, back to the program.
A child grew up too fast, went running wild. Now we don't know who to pray to anymore.
Welcome back to the final hour of Spaced Out Radio tonight. I am your host, Dave Scott. Great to have you all with us. Tomorrow night on the show, we talk Aleister Crowley. Author Richard Spence is going to join us, talking all about Secret Agent 666. Was he that evil, or was he just a brilliant mind? We'll find out at spacedoutradio.com, 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern Time tomorrow night. We welcome in everyone listening in on the United Public Radio Network on 107.7 FM in New Orleans and over 160 countries around the world. Good to have you with us. We are also live where they film The Walking Dead. WQEE 99 Rock the Key down in Noonan, Georgia. Thank you so much for making us your nighttime entertainment. We're also live on KTLK, The Fringe FM, on Renegade Talk Radio out of Las Vegas. And if you're listening in on Revolution Radio, the Double R Machine is a donation station financed by you, the valued listener. Head on over to freedomslips.com and donate today. Bill Cardwell has set the password for tonight in the SOR Space Travelers Club. Chiaroscurist. Chiaroscurist is your password. Chiaroscurist. I think that's it. It's a tongue twister. But Bill sets a password each and every night right here on the mighty SOR. Now, if you want to follow us on social media, you can do so on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio. Use the hashtag Spaced Out Radio if you want to connect with me live during the show as well. Give our Facebook page a like, Spaced Out Radio Show. You can tune us in on TuneIn. Download this show and others on iTunes. Our website is spacedoutradio.com, where we have a plethora of features for you, including our brand new store, which you can pick up your Spaced Out Radio t-shirt and other swag. You also have the option to read the Encounter online, put together by our editors, Eric Markham and Everett Thiemer. My blog is on there as well, and you can join for $5 a month the SOR Space Travelers Club. For the final time tonight, we introduce MJ Banias. He is a ufologist, researcher, out of Winnipeg, Manitoba. His website is terraobscura.net. If you want to check it out, that's terraobscura.net. Welcome back, MJ.
Thank you very much. It's great to be back.
You having fun?
I'm having a great time. This is terrific.
You know, before we continue, I do have to say, I'm going to put you on the spot here for a second. Sure. You actually put a lot of pressure on me, and you don't even know it.
Uh-oh.
You did. Because when we were messaging back and forth, you were like, man, finally I hit the big time.
Yeah.
And I'm looking at this like, what? What did you say? Like, why would you say that? You know, because the humble Canadian thing comes out, right? So yeah. All of a sudden I'm like, damn it, man. Now you're putting pressure on me that I got to bring my best.
Hey, you know what? I have to push, you know, like I have to kind of, I want you to feel, you know, like I want you to know you're doing a great job, and I want you to feel that pride, you know, that you are doing a great job. I have to be honest. That. This is mandatory listening for sort of the UFO community. SOR is like one of the, you know, upper echelon. Like this is the big show. So, you know, like you're like the US Open, you know, like you gotta play. You gotta play the US Open.
Oh man, are we talking golf or tennis? Because both my games suck.
I have to be honest. I think I was talking about golf. I didn't even know in tennis there was a U.S. Open. That's embarrassing. I was like, it shows what I know about tennis.
Well, you know what? I gave up golf a few years ago because my clubs and I just had an argument, and they just didn't want it, because it's always the club's fault. It was never my fault. Never my fault.
Yeah, it's definitely the club's fault.
Exactly. Yeah. Right before the break, you were telling us a real intriguing story about a gentleman named
Stephen
Mahalik.
Mahalik.
Mahalik. I'm trying to think of the NHL pronunciation there.
It's a good Polish name.
Machalik. Yeah, Machalik, I believe. And you were telling about his injuries when he went to the hospital, and that's where you left off before I rudely had to cut you off for the break.
No problem. So the story goes that after sort of he gets burned by this sort of UFO, it takes off, and he, like I said, he sort of stumbles his way. It takes him almost like 9 hours to get home. He's quite sick. He's throwing up. He's so disoriented. He can't really find his way back to the road. Eventually he does. Fortunately, he's sort of picked up, and he goes to the hospital, and the doctors sort of treat his injury. Right, it's what looks like a thermal burn, right? Like if he got burned by steam. That's what it looks like. The shape is definitely odd, right? It's these sort of concentric sort of like circles in a row in this pattern. But they just think, we're just going to treat the burn because that's what it is. So they give him some, ointment or whatever to put on, and they send him home. And sort of over the next several days, his condition worsens. He's still quite sick. The burns aren't going away. In fact, they're getting worse. And the worst part, when I met his son Stan, his son says, like, the smell coming out of my father was awful. It was like this putrid, rotten egg smell, and it was all over the house. Like, it just was emitting from him. So he went back to the hospital, and saw other doctors, and they sort of had no answer for what was wrong with him. They thought potentially he had radiation poisoning, so they gave him, the test for that, which came back negative. They sort of started to look at all of these other potentials, which all for some reason started to come back negative, and they had no idea what was wrong with him. Eventually, he actually did get to go to the Mayo Clinic, and be treated there. And again, they weren't really sure what the only sort of hypothesis, from what I remember, just off the top of my head, was one of the doctors says, whatever burned him wasn't just regular steam or regular heat. There was sort of a chemical or chemicals that were mixed in with this that were emitted. And the chemicals must be doing something to his body, like it must be some sort of poison or toxin or something we just don't know what it is. So it's interesting that the doctors from the Mayo Clinic had probably what we would sort of consider the most rational answer. But the interesting thing about this case overall is it was investigated by Blue Book and the Condon Committee. It was investigated by sort of, again, the RCMP. It was investigated by the Royal Canadian Air Force. It was investigated by the American Air Force. It was investigated by Canadian intelligence and American intelligence. CIA showed up. Like they ran the gamut with this guy to figure out what happened. They took him back to the site. They took some tests. The most interesting thing is about a year later, Michalek himself went back and with a friend, and they pulled out some of the rocks that this sort of thing landed on, and they were highly radioactive. In fact, Chris Rutkowski, who's another UFO researcher here in Winnipeg, he has the radioactive rock in his possession, and it's still radioactive. He keeps it between like cinder blocks so that the radiation doesn't like leak out and kill his family. Excuse me. So it's a very interesting case, and again, it's interesting because of the documentation. All of these records are out. In fact, Chris and Stan Michalek, Stephen's son, they recently released a book called When They Arrived, I believe, and it catalogs every single piece of information. It catalogs like the hospital records for every single visit that he went to the hospital. It catalogs sort of the health problems he had. It catalogs who showed up, the reports from the Air Force, the reports from the RCMP, the reports from all of the different sort of agencies that investigated. It even sort of has a few of the reports about, like, they sent his glove off for testing, they sent his hat, they sent his shirt, everything he was wearing was sent off to testing. And unfortunately, you sort of see the paper trail, and then it suddenly goes dark and everything went missing. Like, his glove is missing. Nobody knows where that glove is right now. And the agencies that were studying it and testing it, we have no idea where it is. And there's paperwork for all this, like the fact that they lost it. There's paperwork on the fact that they lost it. So, it really shows you the path that a proper investigation of a UFO incident can go in just all of these different directions. And the cataloging of all that data, it's significantly more than Roswell ever has had when it comes to UFO information. It comes to reporting information from all these different agencies that are sort of allegedly investigating the UFO question. It's sad too. I mean, Stephen suffered from health problems all of his life after that. The burns would disappear for a few months, and then they would come back with a vengeance. He sort of lost like 20 pounds of weight shortly after that incident. Like, I think it was within a couple months he lost almost 20 pounds of weight. He was sick all the time, and he died I think a decade or so ago, and just he suffered from health problems ever since, and nobody knew what was wrong with him. And it's funny because one of the police reports says he got drunk and fell on a barbecue, and you think, like, you know, barbecue burns don't come back for the rest of your life, and you don't go to the Mayo Clinic for barbecue burns, and you know, military intelligence in the United States doesn't show up to investigate you if you fell on a barbecue. You know what I mean? So it's interesting that you know, some of the reports are these sort of insanely prosaic answers, which are totally stupid and nonsensical. But the man did not fall on a barbecue, you know. But he sort of, to his dying day, he had no idea what he saw. You know, he could describe what it was, but he doesn't know at all where it's from, or he at first even think it was extraterrestrial. He thought it was terrestrial. So again, a beautiful and interesting case, and I got to meet his son, which is, like I said, which I mentioned, was totally fascinating, and having a conversation with him was sort of life-changing for sure, in that, you know, he sort of lets you in on sort of some of the family secrets and you know, how it affected his relationship with his wife, for example. You know, she just wanted just it to end, right? Like, why are these people showing up and constantly taking you away and studying you and questioning you and interrogating you? I mean, the family aspect is huge. Their relationship was on the rocks for quite some time after this incident. Yeah, like I said, you asked me about it, and like I mentioned, it's sort of, I don't know why it doesn't get as much credit as something like Roswell does, because this place should be full of people sort of going to see the site and checking it out.
Was Stephen ever taken after that? Because a lot of people who have that sort of close encounter of the third kind, they become multiple experiencers.
No, and this is the interesting thing. He'd never sort of seen anything since, as far as I know. He never saw anything, right? Like, he leaned inside the craft, looked inside, and all he saw was lights, and he heard what he claims were sort of voices, and they sounded like children's voices talking to one another. But he never saw anything, right? And he, like I said, he never really thought that this was sort of an extraterrestrial moment, not until significantly later, when, you know, he started to meet UFO investigators, and they started to kind of ask him questions, and you know, at that point he was like thinking, well, okay, it's probably not from this planet. But apart from that, no, he was very much a skeptic of the whole thing, and he didn't really know what to think. But he was also a very pragmatic guy, apparently. Like, apparently he was very much like sort of old Polish, like, if I can't see it with my own eyes, I don't believe it, like that kind of guy, right? Like, very salt of the earth, sort of blue collar guy who, you know, everything's done with your hands, and you know, if I can touch it and I can feel it and it's there, then it's there. If it's sort of, you know, everything else is just, you know, imaginary until it's proven otherwise, right? So he was sort of very much followed that philosophy all of his life, with his sort of UFO moment, I guess, incident. I don't even know what to call it. Experience, encounter.
Do you believe that there was any coincidence that both of these events happened in 1967?
Yeah, I have to be honest. Canada is like, we're ripe with UFO events in 1967. It was a major flap for us. Where there, like, some of the best UFO cases in Canada occur in 1967, and there were tons of them, like tons and tons and tons of UFO cases, and it's no different in the States. Like, I think in 1967 was the famous, I think that was Maelstrom Air Force Base where the missiles started to get shut off.
Yes.
I think that was in 1967 as well. So it was a massive flap across North America where there was a whole bunch of events occurring that no one has any explanations for. And I'm not sure if it's a coincidence or not. I mean, it's one thing I'll say is that these are two cases that are more than just sort of stories, right? It's not just a guy who saw something. Like, there is documentation all along the way of, you know, which government agencies did what and when, and it's all out there. Whereas in, you know, some UFO cases are just, you know, we were driving down the highway, we saw this, and that's all we have. There's no other information, right? It's just it's our word. Whereas in these events, these two cases, it's well beyond that. You have physical evidence, you have military involvement, you have full investigations done by various intelligence agencies and Air Force and Navy and whatever. So whatever was going on in 1967, it definitely set off a lot of alarm bells for people. And I think there's sort of a lot of unanswered questions as to what occurred in 1967 that sort of caused these events to happen. You never know. Maybe it was the same craft. The one at Shag Harbor was the...
Well, you know, I just look for patterns. I mean, Shag Harbor, and I realize that I'm reaching here. So if anybody's like, oh, there's nothing to this, I know I'm reaching. But Shag Harbor in 67, Falcon Lake in 67, and in 67, Paul Hellyer is the defense minister. You know, I mean, it just seems really weirdly coincidental. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, yeah. Coincidence is a beautiful thing, right? And I like I said, I don't know what's going on, but it's an example of why, you know, UFO studies or UFO discourse is so great, right? Because you have all of these dots, and these dots are everywhere. Like, there's millions of dots, and it's just, how do you connect them, right? And we all try to connect them, I think, in different ways. I think we all view this phenomenon differently, and I think we all view it through our own sort of lens. And we all see patterns sort of in different places, and the connecting of those dots is sort of this chaotic, jumbled mess. But once you sort of start drawing your lines, right, it sort of becomes this almost beautiful picture of potentially what's going on, this strange series of events that's occurring. It's, I don't know. The coincidence is ridiculous, though. Yeah.
Looking at other fields and other designated lines of ufology here in Canada, there's also the alien contact / abduction phenomena that's going on. How much have you looked into that?
With MUFON investigating, I've dealt with definitely a couple handfuls of people who have had abduction experiences. One thing I'll say though is I think Canadians in general, I think we play our cards a little closer, maybe in regards to this kind of thing than maybe our American neighbors do. I think UFOs in Canada culturally are sort of still seen as a little more fringe maybe than they are in the United States. So people don't report that type of thing as often in Canada as they do, I think, in the United States.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's mainly because we just don't like to talk about anything.
Yeah, and especially stuff like that, because it's very personal, right? The most interesting thing I've always wanted to do this, and I just don't have the access. But I've always wanted to go to northern indigenous communities and ask them about the experiences they've had, right? And be like, have you seen UFOs? Have you ever been abducted? Have you ever had visitors from, somewhere else, whether it was peaceful or whether it was sort of malevolent. Like has this ever occurred to you or your family, or in like the history of your tribe, or the history of your family, right? And unfortunately, I think just because I would be considered an outsider, I wouldn't really be let into that world to examine and look at some of those cases, because I think when you really start to look at some of these UFO cases, they typically happen in sort of often quite sort of rural areas, and in Canada is predominantly like country, right? Like we have more open space than like anywhere else on the planet next to Russia. So when you really think who's going to be witnessing a lot of these sort of UFO events, it's going to be the people who live out of the urban areas, and a huge portion of those people are going to be sort of indigenous people, right? And Aboriginal people who live on reserves out in the north and where there isn't a lot sort of urbanization going on. And it's also in their sort of historical narrative, right? Like you sort of look at a lot of the indigenous mythology that exists in Canada. A lot of it is based upon people from other places, right? From the sky, and they sort of come down and they sort of talk to people and they communicate and they have these sort of dream-like moments and these mystical experiences with sort of these beings that aren't from around here. I think it would be an interesting case study to kind of go and go onto reserves in Canada and to explore sort of the UFO mythology that exists there. And how does it tie into actual sort of objective UFO events and abductions? I think that would be unbelievably enlightening. I think like the UFO community would learn so much from doing that. But I unfortunately don't know of any indigenous UFO investigators. I think that at least I haven't seen any in Winnipeg who I could sort of be like, oh yeah, that guy, and we could go and do that project together, because I would welcome that project. I think this would be a fascinating story to tell, or series of stories to tell. I'm not sure if I answered your question. You asked me about abductions. No. I don't know where I went there.
Oh, well, I think you brought up a really good point, though. We can go back to abductions here momentarily. But when you start talking about the history and the legends and the stories that First Nations, whether they're in the United States or in Canada, I mean, we think of our rural First Nations up north in the territories, or you go to somebody who still lives quite primitively, like the Hopi in Arizona, or New Mexico, pardon me, one of the two states. I apologize for tuning out on that. But you're right. The stories they must have, and the unfortunate part about it is many don't have the technology to record it. You know what I'm saying? Besides a pen and paper.
Yeah. And, I think again, philosophically, I think to those communities, I think they would look at it as there's no purpose in recording it, right? For me, it's a personal experience. It's something that occurred to me because I was there at the right time and you weren't, right? If it was supposed to happen to you, and if you were supposed to know it happened or see it, you would have been there. Right? Like I think that this is part of the sort of the philosophy of that culture, or those cultures, the various sort of tribes and groups. Things happen for reasons, right? In their mythology, nothing is accidental. So if Dave Scott was supposed to see this video of this UFO, he wouldn't get a video. He would have been present when it occurred, and we would have had that moment together, right? Almost like, the way we, they don't talk about dreams, for example. Dreams are very personal things in indigenous cultures, especially in First Nations amongst Canadians, right? Like someone's dream, they do not talk about it, right? It's very much part of me, and I unless my dream, or unless I'm sort of given the signal or I'm told to share it with you, I will not share it with you, right? I think that I think indigenous philosophy and their belief system is fascinating. I think it's totally different than any other belief system on the planet, especially sort of in Canada and North America in general. But just the way their universe works is totally different from sort of the way my universe works. It's sort of a white Westerner, and it's when you try and communicate experiences like that, the language would be, it would be all done in English, I guess, but the language, like the words would be, and the phrases that would be strung together would be so different, and it would be a different way of looking at the UFO question. Because I think there's much more to the UFO question than just sort of metallic ships from outer space. I honestly think that there's a little more than that. And I think Indigenous people in Canada would probably say something like that. They would probably say, yeah, like it's not just, metal, riveted metal ships that come from this star or that planet. There's much more to it than that. It's something almost part of us as well, right? It's a connection between humans, and it's a connection to some other place, not necessarily a planet, but some other world or consciousness or metaphysical realm or whatever. That's sort of, as much as it is physical and real, it's also sort of spiritual and tied in with the rest of creation. It's tied in with the rest of sort of the cosmic order of things. That's my, if somebody's smoking weed,
oh, trust me.
We got there. We just went there.
Trust me.
That mind trip.
You made Bob Davis, the voice who intros me into the show, very happy right now. You made him very happy. You know, never go wrong with that. Never go wrong with that. At least not here. I mean, it's everywhere. So, in regards...
It's basically legal.
And I understand a lot with what you were saying in regards to trying hard to get First Nations to speak about this, because I have had a little bit of success with my daytime career. I have a lot of First Nations clients to actually get some Sasquatch stories out of them, where they're located. They know I'm very open about my subject, but I'm very guarded with how I talk to First Nations people about this. And I've been lucky enough to earn that trust, where I've been tipped off in my area, British Columbia, where to go to find tracks. I've even had people send me pictures from the reserve that they have found. Why do you think that First Nations people, doesn't matter where, are so hesitant to share their stories?
Yeah, I think it does have something to do with sort of the philosophy of their group, right? Like, or not their group, but like the philosophy of, I guess, the way their life has sort of been lived for the last however many thousands of years they've kind of been kicking around this country. If let's say this is all connected, the UFO question, the Sasquatch question, let's say it's all part of the same bag, and let's say everything's part of the same bag, the entire sort of cosmic order of things is all related. Someone being present at a moment where this intelligent other shows up and speaks to you or presents itself to you in some way, this would be a major sort of private and personal moment. You are basically sort of communing with something outside of the normal, something spiritual, and I think for them it's private because they would say, again, I was the one who was chosen. You weren't. And it's not a pride thing. It's just it wanted to speak to me, so I'm going to keep that in confidence. Or it wanted to show itself to me, so I'm going to keep that in confidence, because whatever it is, and I sort of had this moment of communication. I think this is just a philosophy. I don't know sort of why specifically that they would struggle sharing it, but I think that's a huge component of it. I think it's just sort of the natural evolution of the way Indigenous philosophy has sort of developed over sort of the 10 or 20 or 30 or 40 millennia that they've been living in North America. I think it's just part of their culture. It's part of their sort of upbringing. So
could you say trust?
Trust would be, it's an interesting one, right? Because, does that mean then that within their own community, they talk about it freely like it's no big deal, or not like it's not a big deal, but they talk about it like you and I talk about it, right? So, do within the community, do they gather and say, this happened to me, and then they talk about it, and they have, like, they share their stories? Maybe if that does occur, then it could be a trust thing. If that doesn't occur, right? If they don't do that, if it just stays personal to just me alone, then it's not a trust thing. It's just a philosophy piece, right? Because they would trust sort of the members of their community generally. They would trust their elders. They would trust the sort of the leaders to be like, this happened to me. Can you tell me? They would trust their sort of religious leaders. If there's like a shamanistic kind of religious idea in the background, they would sort of speak to those people and the healers and say, like, this happened to me. Can you help me understand why I was chosen, or can you help me understand what this meant? I don't know. I don't know if that happens. I have to be honest. Like I said, I know a few Indigenous people, but I don't know any Indigenous people who sort of are very closely connected to their culture. Like, most of my friends who are Aboriginal are sort of, like me, like they're just, they live in the city and they're not really connected necessarily to their sort of heritage as much as some others would be. So I would love to start sort of bridging those gaps, right? I would love to be invited to some of these communities and to be part of these conversations and record these stories. I mean, these are stories I think that, potentially should be told, if that's the respectful thing to do. If they would say, telling these stories is disrespectful, then I'd be more than happy just to listen, and just keep it sort of between us, right? But if people are willing to sort of share their stories and put them out there and to really dig into Indigenous philosophy and how it relates to the UFO question, man, I'm all for it. I would be like the guy to lead the charge. I'll write books if you want. Like, I don't care. So it would be terrific. Something I would really love to do. But again, it could be a trust thing, right? I'm not a member of the community. Therefore, I'm not trusted with that information.
Neither am I, my friend. Neither am I. Let's go back to the original topic that we started like 10 minutes ago on this in regards to alien abduction in Canada. Now, a lot of people are quite silent about it, but there's been a couple people who have come out, especially here in British Columbia. I think of Karina Sybils, who came out in Kelowna, where her family is still being affected by alien abduction out of the Kelowna area. Wow. And I think of Miriam Delicado, who in 1988 was followed from Quesnel, British Columbia, down to 100 Mile House, where I live, and was taken on the 99-mile hill, about a mile, almost exactly a mile out of town, and was gone for 3 hours while her friends sat in a zombie-like state in the car.
Well,
so we do have some stories that have made the media in regards to alien abduction. Do you think because UFOs and aliens are still considered a taboo subject north of the 49th parallel, that we don't probably hear a lot of the stories that would really enhance Canadian UFO alien research?
Yeah, I do agree with you. I do agree. Again, right, we don't tend to make a big deal out of things either, right? Like, as Canadians, like, we're very, very kind of muted in a sense. And again, I think it's just a cultural aspect. We just don't like to draw attention to ourselves, which is why, if somebody bumps into you, you apologize, right? Because you just don't want to make a big deal of it. And I think that this is probably part of it, right? There's a bit of an anxiety that you don't want to draw attention to yourself and be like, a spectacle for the world to kind of, look down and be like, look at this person who they got abducted and here's their story. I also think that it's maybe not necessarily a Canadian thing, but I think it's more of an American thing in the sense that, UFO culture, really the hub of UFO culture is in the United States. It's a huge, like, the United States kind of leads the world in sort of UFO sort of mythology and lore and the building of the narrative, whether there's sort of the true objective sightings and the factual stuff versus the even the made up stuff and the charlatans who just want to sell books and line their pockets and show up on TV shows. I think the United States is very much a hub of ufology. So I think that people who have abduction experiences are more likely to say something in the United States because, again, the United States has that culture of UFO studies and more people who are engaged in it, right? There's more UFO investigators in the United States. There's more, all of the private UFO investigative organizations, especially the biggest one, MUFON, is really based out of the United States. Part of the American sort of cultural mentality is, UFOs. It's a small part, but it's there, and it's a lot easier to find. You could probably go into any major city in the United States, and even a lot of the smaller cities in the United States. You can probably go to any urban center in the United States, actually, and find people and groups who, have, UFO connections or ties to the UFO community. There's a lot of places in Canada you're not going to find that. Like I could probably name a whole bunch of cities in Canada that probably don't have someone who deals with the UFO question. I live in Winnipeg, and I'm the only MUFON field investigator. Like, I'm the only guy. There's no one else in Winnipeg who's involved in MUFON, and we have a population of 1 million people. Like, one would think there would be someone else. I'm literally 1 out of 1 million. Like, it blows my mind. In fact, there's no one else in Manitoba. So what's that? 3 million people? Like, it's stunning to me that a city of 1 million people has one person who is involved with MUFON, and then you have another UFO researcher, and Chris Rakowski, and Grant Cameron's from Winnipeg, and then there's a lot of enthusiasts who have an interest, but they don't really do anything else beyond just engage in conversation about it. So I don't know. I think it's a big cultural piece, and I think that's why you have a lot more abduction reports occurring in the United States, because there's people who are willing to listen to the people who are sort of speaking, right?
So on that note, then, what do you think Canada's role is in ufology?
Apart from some terrific cases and incidents, what is Canada's what a question. I'll have to. Can I think? Can I take a 60-second think on that or something? Because I think it's quite a big question. One, it assumes that the UFO question is divided by borders, right, and nations, which I don't think it is. The UFO question is global, and I don't think that I don't think that Canada necessarily has anything to add to the UFO question as much as I think the United States has anything to add to the UFO question. I think we're all just working together. I think maybe this is the future of UFOs, in that this removal of borders, right? You no longer need to worry about, I live in Canada, therefore I can only deal with Canadian cases, or I live in England, therefore I can only deal with English cases or British cases. I think the UFO world is becoming much more global. At least it's starting to shift in that direction. But I don't necessarily think sort of Canada as a country has anything to add. You know what I mean? Like, does that make sense?
Yeah, it totally makes sense. I mean, let's face it, we're not a militaristic country. We are not a country that is creating a lot of our own products. Yes, we're a resource-based country with oil, gas, trees, lumber. So the necessity to hide this technology.
Oh, I see. So it's from a disclosure standpoint.
Yeah.
Is that what you mean?
Yeah,
oh, okay.
Let's go there.
Sure. Yeah. I think from studying UFOs, I think Canada functions just like anyone else. I think we have some of the best sort of UFO minds out there. I think a lot of our investigators, I think a lot of our UFO theorists or researchers or whatever you want to call them, ufologists, I think, we definitely have a lot of people who contribute a lot of good data to the UFO study, sort of the global UFO study. From a disclosure standpoint, man, I don't know. What would Canada do if it recovered a crashed flying saucer, or a crashed, alien craft? I have to be honest. I think we would really work on returning it as fast as possible. It would be like, oh yeah, it's like when the hockey puck goes into the neighbor's yard. You know what I mean? Because it hopped the fence. You'd be like, hey, you left it here, guys. We're just gonna leave it where we found it. We're going to set up, a buoy so you can find it or something, and with a giant, apology for sorry our country was in the way, and please take it back. You know what I mean? I don't know. Would we keep it? It's so un-Canadian that we would keep something that's not ours. I don't know.
You bring a good cliche up, because I think everybody who's Canadian playing street hockey growing up always had that one neighbor that absolutely would throttle knock kids if a puck or a tennis ball from the hockey game on the street went into their yard.
And they wouldn't return it, right? They would keep it in their shed or their garage or something, right? And they would just collect them, out of spite. Right?
And then it would become the neighborhood game when the garage door is open, is who is sneaking in there to try and find the big box of tennis balls or plastic hockey pucks to try and, get them out, because literally everyone is there. You couldn't play hockey without it. It happens.
You need those things. Yeah.
Exactly. It happens. I guess my big thing with Canada, though, in regards to our own military research. Now, up at Cold Lake, Alberta, back in the 50s and 60s, they were testing out some sort of hovering disc craft. So we do have a history with our military, as finite as it is, in testing this type of gear. And what a lot of people in the United States, about Nellis Air Force Range, where Area 51 is. Canada's Cold Lake, Alberta range is literally, I think, 3 or 4 times the size of Nellis. Yeah. It is massive, and it is top secret, and not a lot of people go there. So maybe you could explain that a little bit.
I don't know much about Cold Lake, but one thing I've been there, but I don't know much about sort of the testing grounds that they have. But one thing I sort of do agree with you is one thing, the nice thing about Canada is because of its size, right? We have a lot of room for a lot of dark deeds. So if there is sort of any testing going on, the space that we have to test would be so vast that you could do whatever you wanted and no one would know ever, because you would just move it out into the middle of nowhere in Canada, which, and for us, the middle of nowhere is literally the same size as all of the United States. We have stretches of this country that are probably, most of the United States of just empty space, especially up north, that we could do whatever we wanted. So, maybe Canada is involved in some shady UFO work. You never know. I got to be honest, you got to hide something. You hide it in Canada because no one's going to find it.
It would make sense.
It would make a lot of sense. There's islands in the tundra area in northern Canada that the islands themselves are larger than most countries on this planet. That no one lives there. Population 0. You could easily do something up there, and no one would see it, and no one would talk about it, and it's just some secret military base. Who knows? Who knows what's going on up there?
You never know. I didn't know that there was a secret base north of me.
There is one, apparently.
Yeah, north of me here in British Columbia. I live in the central part, and there is a base there where it's unmarked, but people will go through, try and cut through there, maybe hunters or something, and they will be warned.
I think when you sort of talk to people who are in the disclosure movement, sort of very active people in the disclosure movement, they often sort of make this claim that Canada is just part of the US's sort of UFO game, right? So, Canada is just one of the players in the work the United States does. So maybe Canada shares some of its knowledge with the United States, but predominantly it's the United States that's really in charge here. And maybe Canada is just allowing the United States to use sort of military bases within the borders of Canada and is providing, scientists or is providing, various assets and resources to sort of make the project go. Oftentimes, I think sort of when you speak to different, like I said, sort of disclosurists, Canada is very much involved in that sort of same game the United States is, and we're kind of, the governments are sort of working together, or the secret shadow government actually runs all of North America, for example, and the prime minister and the president are just puppets of the cabal, or whoever's in charge, right? So this is kind of the common theme that sort of shows up in the disclosure kind of story or narrative. So I don't know, maybe that's what's going on. Maybe Canada is just part of the American network of hidden UFO bodies or hidden UFO crashes and alien bodies. I don't know.
We could be filled, and we wouldn't even know.
That's right. They're actually here.
No, I know, but that is a reality. It could very much well be that way. I mean, what better way for the United States to hide their own secrets, since everybody knows about Area 51, Dugway, Dulce, Wright-Patterson, than up here, where all they have to do is fly close to the North Pole and not attract any attention.
Nobody knows where Baffin Island is. You know what I mean? Like, maybe it's all there. Yeah. That's what I would do.
Me too. Yeah. Me too, indeed. Do you believe then that, and here's a study, and I was talking to Victor Vigiani about this. One thing that I've noticed, and my study is very vague, I'm going to explain that, and has no scientific proof in it. But just hearing people on this show, both American and Canadian, this is something that I have noticed, and I'm curious in getting your opinion when it comes to abductions.
Sure.
I have noticed that the majority of stories that come out of the United States always seem to be very much of a malevolent nature in regards to contact. Yet, majority of stories I hear out of Canada, save for a few, have been more of a positive nature. Now, I'm not saying that the negatives don't happen on this side of the border, because they do.
Right.
But have you noticed that as well?
Again, it depends. I think it's his name, Derek Jacobson. Derek Jacobs. He's a doctor out of the United States. He's a big abduction researcher, and his claim is that like all abductions are malevolent. Right. And he's very much one of those guys like who says like there's some sort of secret agenda and it's usually like in regards to like a hybrid program or something like that. So I think the United States has really been influenced by the work of Jacobs. And he wrote a book. Did he write Intruders? Was that him? Intruders?
Is that David Jacobs you're talking about?
Yeah, David Jacobs. Yeah. That's Intruders, right?
I believe so, yes.
Okay, so that got really pushed upon sort of the American sort of culture and psychological culture in regards to the UFO question, right? This sort of malevolent alien being, right? We see this in Strieber's Communion, and there's another one as well. I can't remember. The point is a lot of the sort of the people who are having abduction experiences now, in their sort of 40s and 50s, potentially would have read, these books, or at least would have been influenced by that culture, right? Like, and not only that, like the X-Files and all these television shows, right, of these sort of aliens that are evil, right? And they're here to invade, or they're here to cause trouble, or they're here to do bad things. We don't see this as much, for sure, in other countries. I mean, you look at a lot of European abduction stories. They're often sort of not malevolent. They're either sort of peaceful, and they're just sort of spreading information, like we're here to talk to you. A lot of them are sexual in nature, in just, the being comes down and it, has intercourse with the human or whatever and then leaves. you also have this kind of it's just there, right? Like it doesn't say anything, it doesn't do anything, it just kind of lands, shows up, kind of looks at the person, and then departs, right? Like it very potentially similar to sort of your experience, right? In that you sort of saw it, and you didn't really finish the story, but you sort of saw it, and that was it, right? It didn't really.
Yeah, we watched it for about. Literally, it was a staring down standoff for about 15 minutes, 20 minutes.
Right, and then it just kind of walked away, right?
Well, it's funny because in our story, Samantha felt that we needed to go to a different part of the forest because there was more beings there that were calling us, and I didn't hear it. She did. Right. So we left them to walk to another part of the forest, and we didn't see anything, but by the time we went back to the original side, they were gone. Right.
So, that is sort of very similar. I think in especially in the European cases, like I said, the contact stories are quite different. They're more contact than they are abduction. It's not to say that Europe doesn't have its share of abduction stories. It does, but really, when you look at like the majority of cases, the Europeans deal with this more contact-like scenario, and yeah, like you say, right, the Americans sort of have this more abduction scenario, and this could just be a cultural interpretation of a strange event. There's a big movement right now, and it really started with Jacques Vallée, but it's picked up a lot of steam, I think, in recent years, especially amongst sort of younger people in UFO research, that we're not really dealing with like an extraterrestrial sort of race proper, like you and I are a race, right? Like that, they have physical meat bodies like you and I. Like they might be able to become physical, but they're not necessarily sort of made of meat like you and I. Rather, the experiences are with some sort of entity that we don't understand, and it just kind of manifests in certain ways. It's a sort of like a trickster-like being, right? It's sort of it's an intelligence that's present, and our interpretation of it is really what gives it sort of an objective presence. It gives it physical body, and it makes it look like a gray, or it makes it look like an avian, or it makes it look like a Nordic or whatever, right? And this has kind of become quite popular recently in sort of UFO studies amongst, like I said, younger ufologists, because a lot of the stories don't make sense. Like really, why would aliens be abducting Americans but having sex with Europeans? You know what I mean? Why is that happening? I mean, a human's a human, right? The aliens wouldn't necessarily appreciate like government borders like we appreciate them, or anything like that. So maybe what we're dealing with is not necessarily a physical extraterrestrial that gets on board a metal ship and flies to our planet, but rather we're dealing with some sort of other intelligence that doesn't really have a sort of a set physical characteristic or a set series of physical body parts like you and I have, or a set sort of ship design made out of metal. Rather, it's sort of this nebulous kind of otherness, and when we bump into it, it takes like a solid shape, or it becomes kind of our interpretation of it, whatever that is. And then all of a sudden, we're dealing with what we think it is. So it could look like a gray, it could look like a 15-foot alien, it could look like a Nordic, or whatever other, interpretation we have. Because you have a lot of UFO cases where a person's standing in a field, a UFO lands, and out walks like a giant bunny. You know what I mean? And this is like a UFO case. And I've seen these, like the giant bunny walking out of the UFO is a UFO case. And is that just what it was, or are we interpreting it as a giant bunny, right? But it's actually a cute story. It just kind of walks off the ship and walks back on, and it walks. It doesn't hop, which is strange to me. But so is that story not true, or is it made up just because it doesn't fit with our kind of preconceived notion of what an alien looks like? I don't know, but I think a lot of it is cultural. I think that Americans typically interpret UFOs and aliens as in a more hostile sense. Because of the culture, right? I mean, alien movies have really hit us over the head with this, right? The aliens are usually here to invade. They're not usually here for peaceful reasons. They want stuff we have, and we have to fight them, or we get sort of enslaved by them, and then sort of the rebellion ensues, or whatever. In Europe, those movies exist, but they're not part of sort of the cultural zeitgeist of Europeans or Canadians, for that matter. Actually, we're pretty close to the Americans, so I would say it is part of our kind of cultural,
Absolutely.
I watch the same stuff that but I think in Europe it's a little different.
MJ, I got time for one question for you, 10 seconds or less. John at hashtag Spaced Out Radio says, if a UFO crashes in Canada, do the Canadians apologize?
Yes, we do.
Absolutely, we do. My friend, thank you so much for being on Spaced Out Radio tonight. Been an absolute pleasure. I'm going to get you to hold on while I wrap this thing up. If you're listening in on the terrestrial radio side, you hear Mr. Ron Bumblefoot THAL playing in the background. Bumblefoot is the official music of Spaced Out Radio. Check him out at our website, spacedoutradio.com. Tomorrow night on the show, author Richard Spence comes on in. We're talking Aleister Crowley, Secret Agent 666. We're going to learn a lot about that, 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern Time. I want to take this time to thank my team for making this show possible. Lana Scott, personal assistant. Everett Thiemer, Eric Markham on the Encounter Online. Jolene Lammers, web design. Catherine James, social media. Bob Davis, our great dulcet tones for the intros. Our Director of Business Development, Kim Gandy, and Thomas McGowan in sales. And, of course, all of you in Spaced Out Radio Land, thank you so much for being with us tonight. Do me a favor, tell a friend, bring them on over to the chat room, because together we own the night. Mr. Bumblefoot, take us home.